Are you ready for it?
I'm a real tough kid. I can handle my shit. They said fake it, gotta fake it till you make it, and I did.
I'm just a terrible person, I guess.
Ice camera bitch. Even when you wanna die. Breaking down, I hit the floor. All the pieces of me shattered as the crowd was chanting more. With a broken heart.
Who's afraid of little old me?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah the Raging Tomato here, bringing to you live another Throwdown Thursday. Gnostic Informant has agreed to finally, well, not that you didn't agree before, but we finally got you on one. Been trying to get you here for a while. And this evening, we'd like to discuss the idea that the Christian God is not the necessary precondition for all knowledge. It's quite a mouthful, but in summary, I believe you told me that basically this I can't even say it, presupposition stuff is all nonsense. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
sophistry.
All right. Elaborate that to me, my friend.
So it's circular, first of all. It's basically like one of the formulations of it is if the Christian God does not exist, knowledge is impossible. Knowledge is possible, therefore the Christian God exists. That's one of the ways it's formulated. I'm not saying that they all formulate it that way. There's other, sometimes it's more based on if God does not exist, then logic, science, morality are meaningless.
Mhm.
Premise two, logic, science, and morality are meaningful, therefore God exists. I'm not even going there. I'm specifically wanting to worry about the Christian Godhead, whether it's Orthodox triune God or someone else wants to postulate their other Unitarian God. I want to know, how is it that the Christian God in particular is the precondition for all knowledge? Why is it that I have to, for example, how do I know this is red, this book's red.
Right.
Is this book's red no matter what? If I'm like tripping balls and I think it's blue, it's still red. There's someone who's, I didn't need
Wait,
to.
it is blue though. You keep saying it's red. It's not red. It's
Well,
blue.
then maybe I am tripping balls. Well, but an Aboriginal native in Australia somewhere can know things. They can learn how to fish, for example. They know where the fish are. They're not
Instinctual.
appealing to the Christian God to have knowledge.
Mhm.
I'm coming at this in good faith. I want to engage with some people who can demonstrate to me why the Christian God is the precondition for all knowledge. And I think it's performative. I think they don't actually believe this. It's just sophistry. We all use the same. We all use data. We all use experts. We all use experience, our what we see, what we smell to build knowledge. We use our senses. We use databases of knowledge built up over time. Nobody goes and finds a doctor based on what the Bible says or what their church tells them to do. They're going to find the best doctor who has a PhD, who's an expert in that field. Same with car mechanic. You go to the expert in the car mechanic, someone that knows cars inside out because they've studied cars, they've worked on cars. You don't pray to get your car fixed. So knowledge has nothing to do with belief or God. And I'm interested to hear how someone can come along and demonstrate to me why the Christian God is the precondition for all knowledge. It's very simple.
Okay, let me ask you this. If you believed that we are all created by God, then wouldn't that essentially, the only reason I have the brain that thinks of the color red to acknowledge words and phrases and people teaching me this is the color red, right? And all of that stemmed from the idea that God made me, then Like, wouldn't that be the baseline?
Which God? Is it the Muslim God? Is it Dionysus? Is it Zeus?
There's
I
only
still want to
one.
know if there's only one God. That's what everyone just kind of presupposes, that their God is the real one.
Mhm,
I'm trying, and we can. I'm even willing to even grant theism
mhm.
just for the sake of argument, just so we can get into the nitty gritty. Right, you can get right into the trenches.
Okay.
Maybe theism is true. Maybe Tag is right. Maybe there is a one. Maybe Plato's God is the true Plato's theoretical not named God. Just he calls him the demiurge, which means creator in Greek. Maybe the
Mhm,
creator is the basis for all logic and reason.
mhm,
The Stoics did believe that all of our knowledge goes through the logos. They had a
mhm,
pre-Christian concept of the logos in Greek thought. So fine, let's go with that. Why the Christian God? That's what I'm really trying to hone in on in this particular talk. And I know that a lot of Christians in this debate circle that can jump on here, and hopefully we can have a good faith discussion about this. I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a philosopher. I'll admit I probably have a lot of holes, and someone's probably chomping at the bits just hearing my introduction that maybe something I got wrong about how I described the premises and all that stuff. I don't know. Maybe. Let's find
Do
out.
you did you ever take geometry? I'm
Yeah.
assuming you did. Okay. Do you remember there was a certain part of geometry where they give you the given, and the given was like a particular number or equation, and with that given, you had to solve the rest of the puzzle, but they gave you what's called the given.
Mhm.
So, like, in my mind, I'm thinking like God is just the given, and we just
Right.
piece everything together based off that. Is that kind of the concept that you're leading into, in terms of
Not
what?
necessarily. I'm not saying that, but I'm
Mhm,
willing to, for the sake of argument, I'm willing to even grant that there might be a single creator that's perfect and know all knowing and created everything.
mhm.
How do we
So
get from there to the Christian God once, you know what I mean? Like Plato
right.
could be right. Aristotle could be right. The pre-Socratics could be right. They all believed in this one, the hen in Greek. This is way before Judaism didn't bring monotheism to the Greeks. They already had this. They already believed this. They thought the myths were all just kind of representatives of things that we experience, things in nature. But the pre-Socratics all believed that really there's just an unknowable, unnameable God in charge of things with lesser daimon and divinities that are intermediaries. This is the same as the Christian worldview, which is without all the Jewish mythology, really.
Right.
I want to know why the Christian God supersedes that. Why aren't we just going with unknowable, unnameable, philosophical, theoretical God rather than Christian Jewish dogma? Reading the Old Testament, Moses and Abraham and the New Testament. Why is that the part of the precondition for knowledge? To me, it's all added nonsense. Even if God is real, and even if God is the precondition for all knowledge, it doesn't get us to the Christian God. It's nonsense.
So let's remove it. Based on your prompt, right? Let's remove the idea that you have to have God in order to obtain knowledge.
Like a naturalistic worldview.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Then
that's plausible in my opinion too. I don't think that's off the picture either.
what does that look like?
Well, okay, there's natural events that lead up to, for example, Big Bang, whatever our model we decide to go with, and we go. Let's say we go with Big Bang and evolution is true. The naturalistic worldview, all of it's true. Well, whatever those preconditions are for all that naturalistic uh, evolution of things to lead to now, sort of determines why things are constant in the universe, like the speed of light or the laws of logic are a result of just the consequences of the universe.
Mhm.
So instead of having a god that creates the laws of logic, it's it just happens to be a fact of things that the way things ended up, that these laws of the universe exist just because. I'm not arguing for that. I'm just saying if that's the naturalistic, that's just if naturalism is true, then that could be a possibility.
Well, you're not arguing naturalism and you're not arguing that we need the God, then what would
Um,
you, or are you more inquisitive to it?
no, my argument is that the Christian God is not the precondition for knowledge. I'm
Okay.
going on the offense on that.
Okay.
That is a nonsensical claim that for some reason the Christian God that we find in the New Testament that's preceded by Old Testament prophecy has nothing to do with laws of logic, of how we know things, or the God's not even perfect. It doesn't even fit the model of a perfect creator. Is a God who's jealous and needs things. It's absurd actually to think that would be a precondition for all knowledge, that we have this flawed Bible that's I mean, I can go on and on about the Bible, but we don't have to do all that. I'm just saying, like, that's my argument, is that the Christian God has nothing to do with how we know things or has anything to do with being some sort of precondition for knowledge.
So you think it's a different God or
I don't
a
know.
type of
I'm not.
creator?
I'm not even. I'm not even staking in what the God is, or if it's knowable or not.
Okay. So you're kind of just shooting a shot in the dark saying I don't believe it could be the Christian God because of these flaws, but I don't have the answer as to what if there even is a precondition to knowledge, what it would be,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I don't have to have the answer to refute another wrong answer. Like, it would be like saying, like, I know that behind that wall there's not a walrus right now, based
Mhm.
on inductive reasoning. If a walrus was behind that wall, it'd be making noises. It would, if it was dead, it would smell. There's all types of things that would indicate there's a walrus behind that wall or something. I don't know, an elephant or something. But I don't know what's behind that. What does it mean I know what's behind that wall? I don't have to know what's behind that wall to be able to refute another stupid argument about what's behind that wall. I don't have to be all knowing to
Mhm.
refute a dumb theory.
Well, but if you had something that told you that God is the precondition to knowledge, would that be sufficient?
What do you mean by something?
If you had instructions of some sort or some type of proof that God is the precondition to knowledge, would you accept it?
If I had proof that it was,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm open to that. That's what I'm asking right now.
Yeah.
What that proof entails, is it just me having a vision? How do I know I'm not just having a trip out or something? Is
The
it,
folder is still blue.
because that's where we get Christianity from. We get Christianity from a bunch of people tripping out, having visions. Paul having visions of Jesus. That's the origins of Christianity. And eventually, the church, the bishops like Irenaeus and Hippolytus, the early saints in the turn of the second and third century, decided enough with these personal revelations. They got to go. We just got to have bishops get in control. We got to stop the revelation. They had to stop the personal revelations. It was getting too out of hand. There's too many people with different theological views on Jesus. Jesus told me this yesterday. Jesus told me that yesterday. And eventually they were like, all right, we need bishopic authority. And we need to, like, get rid of these, like, crazy people and that are like the Nicene preacher, for example, was this Christian who thought, like, all types of Christ was the serpent in the garden of Eden. That type of, they had to decide eventually that everyone's personal revelations don't really matter. We need to have precedent on which ones we want to, that what's going to work best for our church, is
Mhm.
what basically happens.
So, is there a particular religion you would find to be not flawed enough to believe? Right?
I think the ancient Greek system, ancient Greek philosophical Middle Platonist system, probably would be, in my opinion, the most ideal. It's a combination of Stoicism and Platonism, and it also takes in Aristotelian logic. It takes into consideration some Pythagorean elements. It was blending a lot of philosophies at the time. It started around the first century BC. Even
Mhm.
Philo, a Jewish pre-Christian, people call him pre-Christian because a lot of his ideas sound very Christian. He talks about the Logos, and he talks about God having a son of God, inheriting the kingdom of heaven. Even he was a Middle Platonist, and I would argue that most of the early Christians were themselves Middle Platonists. Justin Martyr was probably a Middle Platonist too. Pretty sure he even says that. I think Christianity borrows from Middle Platonism to get a lot of the ideas that we see today. So why even, what's the point of throwing on all this Jewish mythology crap of Moses's laws? We don't even follow Moses's laws anymore. Why do we need that? Who cares about prophecy that are clearly fake, written by someone way later? No one's ever mentioning Isaiah in the time Isaiah lives. All of a sudden, 400 years later, people are start mentioning Isaiah. It didn't exist. Abraham didn't exist. There's no evidence for these people existing. There's no evidence that the Old Testament is legit. It doesn't show up in any sources until the 3rd century Hellenistic period, and then it just backdates itself. And so why should we follow something that's clearly not true? And we can just have a theoretical, philosophical views on God that suffice exactly what we're talking about here.
Okay. I mean, I'll dive in a little. I'll take a little tangent. I mean, essentially, like Christian law, morality, so on and so forth. I've always found it like you're going to benefit more than lose, right? There's a net gain to believing in Christianity, right?
Sure,
You
sure.
have
There's a
your
yeah.
10, yeah, it's all net gain overall. And who was it? Somebody did a dissertation on it, about how it's actually better for a person to follow Christianity and live by that moral system and code. And they actually feel better, they're happier, and their
Sure.
lives tend to be better overall, and so on and so
I don't even
forth.
disagree
So,
with that. But
yeah.
the thing is, the studies actually don't even say it's just Christianity. It's being religious in general. People
Hmm.
who are Taoist have better livelihood. People who are Buddhist, people, even Muslims and Jewish people and neo pagans experience through these studies that have better livelihoods and better purpose in life. So why Christian? Why are we singling out Christianity here? You know, that's kind of where I'm gonna keep going back to.
That's fair. That's fair. So with that is a good question. So why could we essentially say the in order to have knowledge, it could precondition could be Buddha, or your precondition could be Zeus, your precondition could
I
be,
Go ahead,
could we
finish.
say, could we say we could
People can
essentially,
make that argument. I think it's just
yeah.
as silly. I think it's just
Hmm.
as silly for someone to claim that their God is the precondition for all knowledge without being able to demonstrate that, without being able to demonstrate how I need Zeus to determine that this book is read. You know, why do I need Zeus for that? Why do I need Jesus for that? Why do I need any God for that?
Hmm.
And so I just think that's what it falls. Anyone can make. I think it's just it's a silly, absurd, circular, question begging on steroids argument. It's just,
Well, but isn't that like that's Jesus though? I am the Alpha, the Omega. That's God. I am the Alpha, the Omega, and it is circular.
yeah,
Like it's to even think about it, like it would be almost difficult for a person to actually fathom the capacity that God, in and as it is, what He's capable of, right? The idea that we can have free will, yet He knows everything already and what's going to happen.
right,
Like it is a circular type of logical test. It's constantly going to derive from itself because that's who He is, right?
yeah.
So wouldn't that actually like make it make more sense?
No, it's just circular. It's just you're left with a circular argument, and it's not convincing. It sounds like sophistry. It just sounds like my God is the necessary condition, therefore He's the necessary precondition of knowledge. That's it. That's all I'm hearing. I never in these conversations with people who are pre-suppers, they're always on the offense asking you, how do you justify knowledge? How do you do this? They never actually explain how they justify that the Christian God is the reason why they have knowledge. I've never heard anyone sufficiently make this argument. I'm hope tonight I would be open. I'm open and willing to hear a good explanation of why it's only the Christian God as the precondition for all knowledge. That is
Well,
what I would love to hear.
and I think that essentially, and just for all of you wonderful people in the audience, it looks like you have a crap ton watching over on your side for
I know it
sure.
was pretty quick.
My
Holy shit! Usually it
my
takes like 45 minutes to get there.
No, yours flew up. You know what? It must be that blazing thumbnail. Did you use
Yeah,
it?
you did a good job on that thumbnail. And
Thank you.
I think this is a hot time to go live too, nighttime. I think so.
I like my time slot. I think I've claimed ownership to it. So you're welcome.
Everyone
I'm
go
sharing it with
subscribe to Sarah Raging Tomato. She's cool. So I met you at the what is it called?
The
DebateCon? Yeah.
BetaCon, that
Yeah.
was so
That
fun.
was a good time. Yeah.
That was really fun. I had a great time, and I loved being able to actually meet people in person, you know? I mean, we're always on screen and interacting, and it's you know, you just never know what you're gonna get until you meet in person, and you're like, "Oh, they're totally normal. It's cool."
Right.
Um,
Right.
but for everybody watching, we will open up the panel here in just a little bit. And then if you do send any super chats, we'll read those here shortly when we're done discussing the topic and before we open the panel, of course. So please feel free to send them in on both sides. They will all come in. We'll be able
Yeah.
to ask them. Okay. So I guess essentially, if you believe in Christianity, right, that is your baseline. And if you believe in Christianity, then you believe that the whole there's a verse where it's like I know the count of every hair on your head, right? And like God knew me before I was even my parents knew me,
Mhm.
right? So if you believe that factor, then you already have that given that I was talking about earlier, that if he made me, he knows me, he gave me that my low IQ, my dumb blondness, like, you know, he gave me my goofy quirkiness, like all of these things. And the fact that I know that that folder is blue and I'm gaslight or I know the folder is red and I'm gaslighting you that it's blue. Like he knows that I will do that, and he knows who you are, and he knows all of these things, and he knows I will see the color red. He knows you will see the color red. Um, like, and I presuppose that because I believe that he is my creator.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a Christianity standpoint, if you don't believe that he is the end all be all alpha omega of everything, then of course you're going to question the presupposition because if you're a non-believer, then you don't believe that he made you to begin with. You don't believe that he knows everything before I do it. You don't believe that he gave me free will. You don't believe that he knows every hair on my head. You know, like you don't believe that, therefore you couldn't possibly understand the presupposition that is already a given, because why? My Bible tells me so, and I read the Bible, and that's what says in the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
I don't even know
So
if the Bible actually says that Jesus is the precondition for all. That almost sounds like a Gnostic argument, like
yeah,
the
well then I
Valentinians.
would say the presupposition to knowledge is Eve eating the apple, that bitch.
Yeah, knowledge is evil in Christianity. Well, some of the verses
Well,
Paul from Paul.
it was like all knowledge, right?
Yeah,
So, and that's where the free will and all of those things stemmed out of, was like if you weren't, um, yeah, you get all knowledge,
it
but
also
there,
depends on what sect that we're, because like if we're talking about an Orthodox Christian, they're just going to appeal to whatever the church, the saints say. They're not going to appeal to, like, we're just reading. You and I are reading the Bible and going, "This is what the Bible says." I'm getting a plain reading from it, but my exegesis could be different than the church's. So it also depends on which Christian we're talking about. I'm interested to hear different points of view on this from different
Mhm.
Christians.
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, but I think that would be why there's a presupposition already built in, and there is no argument except for that's what I believe. And if I believe in Christianity, then therefore I accept that automatically. It's the given.
And I'm laughing because I'm seeing comments going, not all knowledge, just the knowledge of good and evil. Just sounds silly. It just sounds so silly. Like according to like what this sounds, I don't know. It just sounds silly to me. Maybe I don't know. I'd love to hear why that makes sense to people.
Um, I don't know why it would be like just the knowledge of it was every like now you have the capacity to see everything, right? And now you have to make decisions on your own, right? You're on your own, kid.
Right.
You opened that door, you have to walk through it, and now even the idea of recognizing that they were naked, right? And realizing the shame, right? All of those concepts built in, like you have full knowledge of everything. Whereas before, I believe they were just kind of like a child walking around, dee, 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 dee. You know, like even
Yeah. Well,
toddlers can walk
well,
around naked and not know it's bad.
like animals in nature are just oblivious to to not what good and evil is. I
Yes,
actually think that's what I think Genesis was intended to
we were
to
animals first.
well, humans are cursed with knowledges of good and evil. We're aware that our grandmother might die in a month from now, and
Mhm.
animals out there don't even know who their grandmother is. They're not aware of things that the knowledge that we're cursed with, that we carry as a burden. That's what I think. But like most Christians, they don't. That's not how they exegete that. They have a whole different original sin doctrine. Comes out of some sort of like strange, baseless original sin. Therefore, you need Jesus type of thing. It always goes back to Jesus. It's always pointing to Jesus. Whatever. I don't think Genesis was written with Jesus in mind at all. It was later reinterpreted with Jesus in mind. That's for sure.
Oh, like the lamb and stuff like that.
Yeah, like whoever wrote Genesis did not know who Jesus was. They're writing this hundreds of years before Jesus existed. And then when when the Gospels are being written, they're sort of drawing from the Old Testament to fulfill prophecy, and therefore making kind of rewriting the purpose of Genesis to point to Jesus and say Jesus fulfills original sin by his death on the cross. Therefore, whatever. Again, this is just me and I don't represent any type of Christian here. They could take me or leave it.
Mhm.
I'm interested to hear what Christians in their denominations think. But that's the funny part. In their denominations, it's like if I talk to a presuppositional Christian who's a Baptist, I'm going to get a different view on God than a Orthodox Christian. But they all sort of agree on that either way, however you define God, whether it's the triune Orthodox God or some sort of other version of that God that's in a different sect, they still think he's the precondition of knowledge. So
Mhm.
based on the presuppositional view,
Well, it would be like, would you be here if your parents never met?
no.
No. So, like, that's how I look at it. Would I be here? Would I have knowledge without God? In my belief system, no, I
I
wouldn't,
don't know how that follows from if I
because he
because
created me. He created
well,
me. I wouldn't even be born. I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for God making me.
that's begging the question because he created me. Like number one, what God, and how do you know that too? I know for a fact that my mom and dad. Well, actually, I don't know. I could have. My father might have might have a different father. I never did a DNA test. I look like my dad. I look like my mom. But I know that I came from my mother and she had sex with someone. I wasn't miraculously born. That I can know. But
Mhm.
when you sort of allegorize that to, well, God created me, so I know he created me. That's circular. That's begging the question. We don't know that. I know I was born naturally from my mother. As I already pointed out, maybe my father is my father. That's possible, but most likely he is. But to say, well, God created me, therefore I know he created me. It's just circular. It's begging the question.
Well, I think that comes back to, again, the belief system, though. If I have my Bible in place and I, have my church, like, it's just built in.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
it.
disagree with that.
It's just
I,
built in,
I'm not,
because
and to me,
if
that's
I
it's subjective. Then I
and
think
it well,
it
it
doesn't
would
become objective
be
because you
I think
decide
it
it
would
was
be, well, it'd be subjective to your religion. If I was
right.
Buddhist, right, then
Yeah,
I would believe something completely different, and
subjective.
I would believe that, you know, I don't Buddha, I'm guessing, would be the creator of things, or whatever the case may be. I don't know Buddhism, but um,
Even even the
mhm,
Christian God is subjective because in one place in the Bible he says pork is you can't eat pork or meat strangled or sacrificed or whatever. And then he changes his mind after he decides, okay, eat whatever you want, eat pork, eat whatever. Really, the reason why is because they're trying to get Gentiles to join the church, so they don't want to deal with that stuff. But whatever, let's pretend God changed his mind and decided when he told Moses that these things are mortal sins. That if you do these things, you surely will be punished if you do these things. And now,
mhm,
all of a sudden, now you can eat pork. That's subjective. That's subjective morality right there. That's the
mhm,
definition of subjective morality. It's God's subjective ideas of what is right and wrong, and Christians just follow what the last part of the Bible says. Forget about the first part of the Bible, but the last part, he changes his mind. So when
mhm.
he changes his mind, that's the definition of subjective morality. they just call it objective because it's an objective standard to
Well,
follow what their church tells them, but it's actually subjective under God's view.
yes and no. My view would be subjective to what God says. No, it would be objective.
Mhm.
It would be objective because I just take everything as is from God. So if he can be like if he changes his mind in the Bible or says something different, but to me it's still all objective.
I don't know if I understand that. I don't know if that makes sense to me, because if it's objective, if it's wrong no matter what, whether I like it or not, that pork is good now. Oh, well, it was bad. That was
Mhm,
objectively the case under Moses's law. That eating pork is bad.
mhm.
But now it's good. I mean, where is the objective? What are we measuring objectivity here? Why is it, no matter what I think, why is it good or bad? Because God said so. That's
Mhm.
subjective that's God's subjective morality then. You know? It'd be like me deciding I think that we should have laws where you can't eat cashews, you have to drink only water, and we should bathe in milk every day. And then I have like 1,000 followers that all believe in me, that my rules. That's subjective, because they're all following it objectively doesn't make it objective. They're just following my own subjective whatevers, my own subjective laws. I think there's no difference in following what the Bible says, especially when it's changing over the course of the Bible.
Um, I think that's beyond my pay grade.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying like I'm God or anything like that. I'm just saying like,
Yeah.
how do we determine that it's objective, that it's because it says it in the Bible? I don't know how we measure that. I don't know how we determine that. That's why I don't know. I don't know. Even if I agree, even if God says like stealing is bad, and I agree stealing is bad, I still don't know how we determine that that's objectively correct, that stealing is bad.
Well, and that I think that comes down to the precept being that he is the he is the beginning.
Back to the circular reasoning.
Right. So if you
That's where my problem is.
hmm. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is I will go ahead and drop the link in the chat, because maybe there are some smarter people out there than me who can answer this or clarify or offer something better than, because I am not the debate bro person to.
I think you warmed it up, though. I think you did a good job of getting things warmed up. Now people can jump in and critique what I was saying to you or something. I think it was a good start.
But you're still not claiming anything as outside, like as
My
outside of just saying it's just like you're just saying a precept is nonsense,
Well, not even
right?
necessarily precept is
But
nonsense. I'm
but
very
then I want
specific
to
about.
know you like I
I'm not.
still want to know then if precept is nonsense, if it, oh my god, they came flying in. If precept is nonsense, then how would you say otherwise? Like, what would be the opposite of that? What would make it right? Not precept, right? Or where would knowledge come from then? If you can't say there's a precept on God, then where does it come from? And you said you don't
Well,
necessarily make the
I
argument
would.
for naturalism.
Yeah, but I would also. I can also appeal to Aristotle, inductive reasoning, and our experience, our data that we collect. People write things
Mhm,
down. That gets passed on. People write more things down. People question things. Go, okay, here's my observation, and I have a hypothesis on that observation, and then I test the theory out, and then we get more knowledge on that, and then we add that to the database, and then over time you get fields of study, expertise, databases. That's where we get knowledge from experience, from inductive reasoning. But none of that
mhm.
appeals to Jesus is not part of any of that process. And I would even argue that every single Christian doesn't use Jesus for how they determine things on a regular day basis. They use inductive reasoning.
I mean,
That's just how we do
Christians do
things.
it every day, though. Like we choose to do good because of God. We choose to make decisions accordingly because of God. We choose to do X, Y, and Z, or have uh, self-discipline, or this, like all of these decisions are made because we choose to believe.
Yeah.
Um,
But you still, even if you choose to have your entire worldview based off of the Bible or based off of your church and the saints and the Council of Nicaea, even if you decide that, you still, on a day-to-day basis, as a human being, you still are every day using logic, inductive reasoning, drawing conclusions based on evidence, patterns, and observations, appealing to experts. Like I said, when you go to a doctor, you don't pick some random. You pick the best doctor who can. If you have a heart disease or something, you're going to find the best doctor who studied this stuff. You're not going to go to some random person and pray on it. Or
mhm.
same for cars, getting a car fixed. You're not. Our knowledge is based on our evidence, patterns, and observations. That's how we decide. That's how we build knowledge. And you don't even have to be right. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're always right. That's why we're always challenging all of our data. That's why we're challenging what we supposed to be true sometimes. Sometimes things change. So yeah, I'm not claiming to have
Okay.
all the answers. My particular claim is not that I know the precondition for all knowledge. My claim is that the Christian God is not the precondition of all knowledge. That's my claim.
Okay, that's fair. To anyone in the backstage, there's a lot of new. Thank you, Dub. I see you. Um, anybody who, thank you. I see you. And then there's two more back there I need. If you don't cam up, thank you to you. And there was one more. I just need a quick cam up, Dr. Luke, or else you don't come on. Um, I don't know. I think it's kind of, I get that it's circular, but I feel like that's the way the world turns. Everything like from the circle of life, we like we're born, we die, we turn to dust, we go back, and inevitably those elements come back into play somehow later. So
Well,
for
I'll admit this. I'll admit that everyone has presupposed axioms in their worldviews. A naturalist will automatically rule out miracles. So they will determine what they think is the case, always ruling out supernatural and miracles. That is their axiom that they're using as an axiom no matter what. But
Mhm.
that's not the same as saying naturalism is true because the world is natural. Those are two different things. Like they could be wrong about miracles. Miracles could be real, and they could be wrong about that axiom, and therefore their worldview's flawed. But that's not the same as someone going, for example, like let me flip it. Let me do okay. If, for example, the Christian tag formulation, which would be the Christian God does not exist, knowledge is impossible. Let me try this. Okay. The Buddhist God, if the Buddhist God does not exist, knowledge is impossible. Knowledge is possible. Therefore, the Buddhist God exists. I'm using the same circular logic as any Christian would do in their own worldview. It's still the same. Or if I say this, if naturalism is not true, knowledge is impossible. Knowledge is possible. Therefore, naturalism is true. It's this. I just plug and play my own worldview, and it's just the same circular sophistry nonsense. But that's
Mhm.
not the same as me having axioms based on inductive reasoning. So I can have an axiom that I do not think supernaturalism is true. I don't think there's miracles. I don't think ghosts exist. I don't think prophecies are real. I use those as axioms in my inductive reasoning. That
Mhm.
is that's okay. It's fair to criticize that and say, well, you're just basing your worldview off your own axioms, which is that you think naturalism is true. Fine, but it's still not the same as circular reasoning and question begging. It's still not doing the same thing.
You are
They're two different
frying
things.
my brain. I feel like if I ever were to be a pot smoker, this would be the one.
I'm gonna have to after this, actually.
Really.
Just a couple. I don't do a lot. Once in a while, I'll take a couple just to calm me down.
Let's hit a few of these, and then we'll bring on
I'll
our.
have the same THC pen last for the years. I don't know. That's how much I don't do it, but I will take a
Wow.
puff here and there.
I'd imagine if you don't do it often, then that one little puff would
It lasts
probably.
years. Yeah. One
Yeah,
puff,
but
yeah. And then I'll put me to
that
sleep.
would, like, yeah. Piz Mood with the big super sticker over on Gnostics End. Thank you so kindly. Evan Lord with the big 5. Miss Sarah has the Thorpes burn the bridge with this channel. Anyway, my grandma's birthday is coming up. Would taking her to a casino be a good outing? Okay, question number 1. Thorpes, I mean, they just kind of burned all their bridges. I don't really, they're not
As the
like
Thorpes, I don't know who that is.
it's Grace Thorpe and Ben Thorpe. I don't know why this question came up. It's not really on topic, but either way, I mean, it's not like they're not welcome here, but I don't go out of my way to get them here.
Yeah.
And happy birthday to your grandma. If she likes to play the slots or blackjack or whatever, then yeah, the casino would be great. If she's a bingo hall kind of lady or a walk in the park and feed the ducks, I don't know. I don't know your grandma. Why are you asking me that? Luke with the big 5 says, how does one call in to add to the conversation? Luke, I'm guessing that's you back. Yes, it is you backstage. You figured it out, smart man. Kings and Dreams with the big 5 says, popping in to show my homegirl Sarah some love. Shout out to the guest in chat. I'm taking that time slot when football season starts for my son. Good luck stealing it from me. It's a good time slot. 'Tis mine. Myth Vision Podcast, member for 37 months for Gnostic. Wow, that's a long time. How
Very
long have
long
you been
time.
podcasting for?
5 years ago, I started the channel. Well, yeah, 4 years ago, actually. My channel is
Wow.
exactly 4 years old, actually. My channel.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
What got you to even wanting to do this? Just curiosity or
Just got really interested in ancient mythology and the Bible and stuff like that, and wanted to make videos and interview scholars. Just what I've been doing.
that's smart. I had one girl tell me that she needed medical advice, but like the type of medical advice she needed would have cost her a lot with particular experts and figuring out solving the mystery. So she just started a podcast and started bringing them on, and then started inquiring everything along the way
Yeah.
for free. So I was like,
I'm-
that's not a bad
I mean,
deal.
Aristotle and Plato would always say the best way of learning is face-to-face conversations between a student and a teacher. And I
Mhm.
say I agree with that. Based on my channel from the last couple of years, just talking to experts, as I've learned so much on all this stuff. Learn
That
Greek and
makes
Hebrew and all that stuff,
Yeah, that's smart. But Myth Vision asks, how do you know God exists? Because we know stuff. Any thoughts to add to that?
I think it's spot on. I think I'm sold.
Well, I mean, if you don't want to accept that, right, then you have even further, further depths to go in order to figure out how do we know, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because if it's not God, then what is it? Right? Where did we start? Where did we begin? Where did our brains start functioning? I mean, even if you believe in the naturalism, right, then you still have to presume the Big Bang theory, and that's just a theory,
Yeah.
right?
I think
So
there's an infinite possibilities of why this is all here.
makes sense. Discovering Sins of the Big Two. Neil's precondition for cool is a killer beard.
That's so true.
Fair enough. Kings and Dreams of the Big Two. I'll catch the replay, get all the likes up. Yes, Kings told you all what to do. Do it. Cool V1C with the big 5, helping with that dono goal and showing support. Thank you kindly. And you guys grifting is actually shitty tonight. Do better. Do better, chat. Normally by this point we have way more questions, and I'm actually disappointed that none of you are asking more. K2 keep on trucking with the big 5. Sarah's panels always make me want to go to the Loves and get a pack of American Spirits. Yes, we've turned K2 to smoking, who has never smoked before. And Gesterald sending in, utilizing his membership, says 6, Sarah. It was 6 months ago. What the fuck? Yes. You've been
Nice.
here a while, Jess.
That's pretty cool.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and kick off the panel and have some fun with it. Everybody is not cammed up back there. I know one of them. Well, I got nah. Yeah,
Who
I
you got?
see you. I'm
Who's that?
excited. I've been wanting to reach out to this person for
Ooh.
so long, and I just haven't yet.
Is
We'll
it a
just
good
see.
preceptor?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm
Bring him
impressed
on
with
then.
this
Let him
person. We're
skip the
gonna have
line.
some fun.
Let
All
him
right,
skip the line.
he is gonna skip the line. I'll tell you that right now. Here we go.
I don't know if anyone can hear me. What the heck? What am
I have like an ad right now.
All right, we're gonna go ahead
Oh
and
shit!
kick
There's
this
a whole bunch
off.
of people in here. Oh,
Bro.
Chase Haggard's here. There
Oh,
we go.
What's
there's
up, Neil? How are you,
What's going
man?
on, man? Good to see you,
There's
dude.
more
Good to see you too.
backstage too. So we got for the record, and Gnostic, I know you haven't been here, Chase, and probably most of the bottom row are not familiar with this territory. But you can be booted. You cannot
Oh.
boot Gnostic, and I'm vetoing Chase in for the evening as well, and Fatty, because Fatty, I didn't know you had an interest in this topic, so I am vetoing to keep them on for the evening. Anybody else is up for grabs. You can boot. There's other people. You want to be booted, Fatty? You all right? Fine. Fatty's not vetoed. But
But
Chase,
these brokies don't have money to boot me.
Can I actually
Yes.
make a motion to not be vetoed on the account that my beard is better than both Neil's
I have
and
this-
Chase's?
There we go. He's not lying either. He's not lying. That's a good beer right there.
And
Well,
speaking
technically,
of,
mine is just high quality Sharpie, but
Yeah.
this isn't live,
The,
so
That's
we're
fair.
backstage.
the
so we can
mustache
talk
does
about this.
mog. The mustache is mogging my mustache.
Chase, didn't you just get married? Was that you?
I did. I
Oh,
did.
congratulations.
Congratulations,
Thank
sir.
Nice.
And preemptively booting Duck to the back for 10. So Duck, I do see you back there. You are already at the back of the line anyway. So I'm going to hold on to that. And when it is your turn, I'm going to bring you up for 6 seconds and then boot you back for 10 minutes. That's fair. But I also have backstage James Live Talks, Abe Dinkus, Caucasian Sasquatch, all waiting in line. So if you do boot or if you want to see them up here instead, it's $1 a minute starting at 5. Outside of that, I want to open it up to Chase. I know you have something smart to say to Gnostic. Who's got feedback? Please fix your shit. Thank you. Go ahead, Chase.
Yeah, I hope all the names that Sarah just listed, they better be interesting, right, Neil? I mean, with
Right.
Abe Dinkus, and what was the other one? I don't even know, but
Yeah, Abe Dinkus and Caucasian Sasquatch. He's a regular here.
Caucasian
And-
Sasquatch, yeah.
That's good.
They better be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to see you, Neil. Hope you're doing well, man.
Good to see you too.
So I know it seems like things are still leaning kind of the classical foundationalist route, right? Where it's like, okay, well, I have these axioms that I start with, and they don't need to be justified because I can do things and they're repeatable and they're pragmatic. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, it's fair. Fair.
Okay. The issue with that is, and that Schoolboy would probably take a similar tack, and Schoolboy is super intelligent. I'm glad he's on here, but what are you going to do if we just use that same standard for justifying the possibility of knowledge, ethics, and metaphysics? We say, well, Orthodox Christianity works, or whatever, theism, and I'm sure Schoolboy and I would go off on others. It works and it's repeatable and it justifies these things, and I don't need anything further, and it's an axiom.
What do you mean by it works? You're talking about or as like what works? What are you talking about?
So it works in the same sense as you're saying, well, I look out in the world, we have, seems to have uniformity of nature, we identity over time, the laws of logic, they just seem to be in place. So I'm just going to take that I have them and I don't need to justify them. We could make that same move then and just say, well, I'm just going to take it that orthodoxy is true and it justifies those things. and I don't need anything further, and I don't need to give an account for them, it's the same move you're doing, but just with a different foundation.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to me just asking why Christianity though? Why Orthodox Christianity then? That's what I'm fine with that. I'm fine with people having their worldview grounded in a specific thing. Great. I get it. I understand that. I'm also wondering why it's the only precondition for knowledge.
For sure. Well, just doing an internal critique at first, why would we need to answer that if we're using your standard of?
You don't. I completely admit you don't need to answer that.
Mm-hmm. So this is, and I'm happy to, but I'm just trying to do an internal critique at first to show the weakness of the position that it seems you have of, okay, well, I just have access to these things and they work and we can do the same thing. And then you're adding another standard of why that. Well, we can say, well, why your arbitrary assumptions? And now it's pushed back to beyond classical foundationalism.
And I'm not claiming that people should follow my particular axioms or whatever my precondition, my presuppositions are. I'm not asking that. I'm particularly trying to hone in on just Christianity, for example, other than just more of a theoretical Platonist model that works just as well.
Are you looking for more of a like positive account than like an argument? Is that pretty much where you're going with this?
You mean by positive account, like demonstrate why the Christian God is the yes? I would love that.
And I'm happy to get into that, but first I just want to point out there's an I thought there's somebody talking. There's an arbitrary.
That was me. I was just saying, get into it right away. Just show them something, like show them something. For sure, like, but
well, go ahead, Chase. I know you're running a line of logic. I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, no, it's because I like Neil. Like me and Neil, we haven't talked a bunch, but like we have good rapport, and so I'm trying to just show that based on the standards that you already hold, it's inconsistent to then be asking for justification for other positions, which we can give. But I'm just saying it's inconsistent because you're just granting yourself these things and saying, I don't need to justify them, but you guys do.
I don't necessarily agree with that because it's like I said with the whole what's behind this wall thing. I don't need to know what's behind the wall to sort of question why someone might think there's like an elephant behind the wall.
In the analogy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You can go with that.
In the analogy, we're saying, okay, you're saying there's a thing called a wall. What is a wall, and what makes walls possible?
I would say, is there any other explanation besides what we both call that the wall? This wood with a handle and a door, and it opens up, and there's something behind it.
The question keeps getting pushed back. All it is, we can just keep on ontology of just predicating thing, right? Neil, wall, phone, YouTube, these different things that have existence. Whatever's being predicated, we're taking the question back a step and saying a worldview that can account for these things is necessary to appeal to them. And if you don't have the ability to account for something that you're appealing to, then you can't appeal to that thing as some kind of standard. And if you forego giving an account for it, well, we're in the position I mentioned before, if you're going to have to accept relativism.
And Chase, if you don't mind, I don't mean to.
No, I don't necessarily agree with that because we can have things that are objectively true, and we can agree on these things that are objectively true, like snow is white, for example. I don't necessarily have to account for that. I don't have to appeal to anything to account for that. We just know snow is white. We both agree on that.
But what's in question is the thing called snow and it being objectively true. That's what's
also
in question.
Whiteness. Also
whiteness, snow, right? All these
That's
things.
Fine. I get why you're asking that, but why would Christianity or any worldview for that matter be the only way to account for those things?
Yeah,
if I may interject, Chase, that there was something that he said that really perked up like my ears, and it came down to like, I know that you said that you're not a philosopher, right, Neil?
Right.
Have you ever heard of Munchausen's trilemma?
No.
Or Agrippa's trilemma, it's sometimes known as.
I've heard of these things. I probably couldn't explain it right now. No.
So
go ahead.
It's a critique that about epistemology that essentially all worldviews boil down to one of three things: either
we lost
or circular.
You cut out for a second.
Schoolboy you started you cut out right when you're getting into the horns of the dilemma.
Let me hop on my laptop. My phone's glitching out. I'll be right back, guys.
Sure, take your time.
So all I want to point out is the line I was just going down is just, okay, we just have truth, and objective truth is what you're saying. That's what we're bringing into question, is how you can actually justify that claim in general.
Well,
and you're saying I don't have to.
Well, I would appeal to our inductive reasoning and experience, and there's like certain things like knowing snow is white. I don't necessarily think it matters how we account for that. It's just a simple snow is white.
Okay,
So
we can just do the same thing now and just say I don't need to account for my truth claims. It's just simple God exists. You see how if you push back against that, that's being totally inconsistent.
It's a mental shortcut.
Yeah.
Yeah, but snow is white we both can see snow. We both can touch snow. It's right there. God exists is more of like what God? A Christian God, a Buddhist God?
Yeah, but here's the
way
thing.
more. But your definition of snow, you got to define snow. What are you defining snow with?
Snow exists with or without the definition. The definition is a function of language.
Not really, because technically the word snow.
Let me finish.
Hold on.
James, calm your tits down. The definition is a function of language, which is a human construct.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it's objectively true no matter what I say
is
about
also defined by the fact that you have eyes that perceive a very particular spectrum of the light, right? So
but it's still
the thing you share in the
say about it.
Yeah, true. It's objectively true because of what we are. The same way his statement is only objectively true amongst Christians.
Okay, but this is you're just claiming this is just objectively true. We're asking you to account for that, and you're saying we don't have to.
No, you're saying you don't have to. We're saying that we don't have an account for it. You're saying God is here, and God means that we don't have to. Right? That's the end of your inquiry.
That's literally not what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to actually account for our truth claims, and you're saying we do not have to. We just have objective truth.
There are certain things that we know are true through experience, right? The red book.
And what are those? And how do you know that those are true?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about, but not everything we know for sure is true. Snow is white is objectively true no matter what we say about it.
How do you know that?
Experience.
Because we have a color spectrum. We decide with our language, English language, the color white describes this right here. That's the color white. So
you're
snow
still predicating
also has the same color,
but you're still predicating a thing, right? Whatever details and attributes you want to point out of the thing, you're still saying there's a thing outside of me that exists. That's a huge metaphysical universal claim, and you're saying I don't need to account for it. And then you're asking us, and we can give an account. I'm just trying to point out that you just get to grant yourself things that you don't grant others.
Yeah, but it's not the same. Snow is we both agree snow exists in our world. We don't know, even if I grant that God exists, we don't know what this God is, or if it's the Christian God, or if it's the Muslim God. We don't know that. So that's
arbitrary.
It's a way bigger step to just grant God exists.
It's a postulate. It's called a postulate, sir. It's just a postulate.
Okay.
Some people have beliefs, whether they are a positive or negative assertion, they cannot be proven. That's what it's called.
Well,
it's
hold on. If you don't mind, really, I don't mean to cut in, but I do.
I just wanted to get something in there. It's called the postulate, and that is true. You can look up the definition of the word postulate. Please do.
All right. So really quick though, I just have to add. I hope you know that the tag is not just saying the formula, right? I mean, we're epistemic holists, right? Orthodox Christianity, we have this position that we hold, gives a positive account. It's the whole entire worldview and paradigm that accounts for all these things. So we're not just saying necessary precondition, therefore God. That's not all at all we're just saying. There is a positive account, and that's something that was mentioned earlier, but was kind of let off.
And that's the whole worldview. But before we get to that, it needs to be shown that they can just grant themselves things without justifying it. That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
just
not
showing
going to
you
be
just
able to show you anything. You might as well just get into an actual subject.
Well, let him.
Wait, you're not going to justify. I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. You're not going to justify any claim.
Sir, no matter which side you're on one side or the other, and it's called a postulate. You cannot prove it. It's called faith. So you have a faith side, And
how can you prove that you can't prove it? Can you justify that claim?
Yeah, it's because of this sandwich. That's how.
No.
How does sandwich account for that?
Same way Jesus
That's your
does.
argument?
The same way the Trinity does. What do you mean? How does a sandwich does everything?
Come on now. Hey,
Sandwich
hold on.
uncreated.
Allow me to try to bring some assembly. Let's try to go one at a time. At least try. Go ahead. Back to Chase. I think you were kicking off before I interrupted.
Yeah. So all I'm pointing out and why they're getting angry is because they are not being allowed to just grant themselves objective truth claims without justifying them. And now they're just shouting sandwich.
The exact same way that you are. I have as much evidence that sandwich created the universe as you do that Jesus did. Actually, probably more, because sandwich I can prove tangibly exists. You can't do the same for the Trinity.
So you only believe in things that physically exist?
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, but you can only prove things exist that are physical, right?
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, well, then how do you prove non-physical things?
You're moving the goalpost because you don't want to acknowledge the fact that my sandwich has more viability than your Trinity. Your Trinity doesn't even make it conceptually.
Can you make a positive account on how a sandwich grants you the possibility of knowledge?
Thank you.
Sure. It created everything.
Continue.
Without the Trinity, or without the Trinity sandwich, I can't have knowledge, and I have knowledge. You have knowledge, so obviously, sandwich created things.
So you're complete. You guys, and Neil, this is actually where I was kind of getting into it before my phone was having problems. You do misrepresent the tag argument. It's not an argument that's just saying like it's not a tautology. It's saying God is the necessary precondition for knowledge. Knowledge, therefore, God. Right. So the argument is that God is the necessary precondition. Now, to substantiate that claim is actually a disjunctive. So I know that you're not a philosopher, but
what do you mean by that?
So a disjunctive would be a proposition that is an either-or statement, essentially. So the possibility of knowledge is either theonomous or not theonomous, meaning from God, and it is not theonomous because there is no autonomous worldview that can actually account for the possibility of knowledge.
You would have to ask God for that to be the case, sir.
This is a false binary.
No, well, and it's not a false binary.
How's that a false dichotomy?
Yeah, and there's
because you're forcing something that we don't know the answer to into an either or when we don't know if these are the two options available.
Well, you're claiming we don't know the answer. We have a different position than you. So you're saying, oh, don't know, you don't believe something. Well, let me finish. You don't believe something, so nobody knows it. You're going to need to actually demonstrate that claim. And we can start off even more simply. Either the universe is intentional or it's not intentional. Is the universe intentional, powdered, dusty, or is it not intentional?
I must be confused about what you're trying to communicate me. Could you lead the way and demonstrate?
Do you understand the question? Can you repeat the question I just asked you?
I want you to lead by example and show me how.
Can you repeat the question I answered?
I'm asking you to teach it better.
Okay, great. Is the universe intentional or is it not intentional? This is a true dichotomy. It's an either or, and one of them will immediately collapse and destroy the possibility of knowledge. So in your worldview, is the universe intentional or is it not intentional?
Don't know.
You don't know your own worldview?
I don't know if it's intentional or not. I have no idea. I didn't create everything.
Okay, cool. So you do not hold the belief that the universe is intentional, correct?
Let's say
it may be intentional. What I hold the belief is that I don't.
You don't know what you believe.
Hold on. Let me finish. I don't hold the knowledge of how the universe was created. Do you hold the knowledge?
God created the universe. I don't know every single mechanic, but again, you're not answering. 1 second, Dr. Luke.
Sure.
You're literally saying, no, the universe is not intentional. I don't hold that belief. That means everything in the universe is accidental.
I didn't say that.
And that. So you do believe the universe is intentional.
What I said is that I do not know the answer to that question because
I didn't create.
I didn't create
in your worldview.
I wasn't there.
You know what that means? Do you know what that means? Because it's an either or and it's an actual dichotomy. That means in your worldview, I don't know the answer. That means it's not intentional.
That's not what that means. As much as you want it to mean that.
Is it intentional?
What I'm saying is you're asking for information I don't have.
Okay, yeah. So you don't know if the universe is intentional, correct?
Oh my fucking God.
Oh, whoa.
Correct.
Can you sorry.
Focus?
I'm sorry. I've been listening to this for like the last 15 minutes. I just want to say
hold on. Just a second. Let me do some logistics and then I'll hand it back to you, Dr. Luke.
Sure thing.
You a whole ass bitch, Sweater.
Sweater has dropped a full 100, and
Wow.
here we know 100 is a full boot for the
Someone's
evening.
getting scared that his Jesus is going down. Bye, Sweater.
So any of you Flow
Go eat
State
your
Powder
sandwich.
Dusty fans,
breathing
if
it.
you if you would like to keep Flow on, you have to match it. So I'm going to put Flow backstage for a couple minutes. If somebody chooses to match to bring him back up, we will gladly keep him here. Otherwise, Flow will be booted for the entire evening. So I'll give you a few minutes to do so. And then
Okay, wow.
and then allow me, if you don't mind, gentlemen, and Dr. Luke, I did say I will hand it back to you. Let me get through just a couple super chats that came in that I didn't get to get through. Evan Lord sends with the big 5. A question for Gnostic. Have you researched Persian philosophy? The Persian philosophy holds up Islam like Greek philosophy holds up Christianity. And that's directly to you, Gnostic.
A little bit. I've talked to some scholars that talk about like Zoroastrianism and the Magi. It holds up Islam. I would say a little bit. I mean, there's probably a little bit of influence on that. Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then past, of course, so throwing a big 5 to say the chat always wins, which is true here. And James, can you just say back in my day real quick?
Ha ha ha, but back in my day. Ha ha ha. Very funny.
And Daniel gifted 5 Gnostic
Daniel.
Informant memberships, and also follows up to say, would the gospel be less psychologically powerful if Jesus was not a god and just a magus? In my view, Jesus was a Gnosticism.
Was the church? Would it be less psychologically powerful? I don't know. Probably. Sure.
I mean, that's just arbitrary again, though. Psychologically powerful could be anything to a million different people.
Right.
And you're getting into different problems of you have a knowledge of who Jesus is through and what he said through the Bible, which was passed on through a historical body that believed that Christ is God.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have a big epistemic problem there of rejecting their belief and then going in. But yeah,
no, I agree. That's an issue with knowing fully who Jesus was. But yeah.
Can I ask you fellas a question?
Well, I wanted to hand it back to Dr. Luke because I interrupted him for the logistics. So, Dr. Luke, back to you, sir. If you want to chime in on it.
Are you a real doctor, by the way?
Yes, actually, it was just conferred last week, actually. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
You never know with the internet nowadays, right?
No, I understand. I totally get it. So, thank you so much, Sarah and Gnostic Informant, for this wonderful show. So, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm looking at your Chase. Hi, Chase. Hi.
Hey.
Luke here. Just call me Luke. It's totally fine.
Can I call you Mr. Doctor, sir?
So you were talking about.
But I am now.
You were talking about intention. So something that I've come to the realization, and it was actually it was through a lot of kind of heuristic and empirical pain, and I'm speaking more along the lines of a child, kind of looking at his father, and I don't need to get into that, but what I've come to understand about this place, this where we are, is that this place is really it kind of distills down to consent and intention and consent, like for real. Like that is the baseline of this place. And last night I was talking to my partner, my life partner.
Oh.
And I just turned 44.
Okay, get to the point. Let's go.
Stop that. I'm just going to put you in the back for
Dr. Luke
him.
to you.
That was
if you're going to egg him on, you're going to say, Mr. Dr. Luke, let's get to the point. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely fucking unacceptable. Hopefully all of you other fine gentlemen have better manners. Dr. Luke, please continue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So my partner and I we've been married for, 12 years. We decided we consciously, with intention and consent, decided to have a child. And we just and our daughter is going to be 9 months old at, towards the end of this month. We've waited, I'm 44, she's 34. You know, we spent our whole lives, you know, I know we always wanted to have children, but we wanted to do it with consent and intent. And, you know, obviously when you have a child, some things kind of come to the surface. And I know for me, that 9-month period of, you know, getting to her nativity, really, it was a healing process, and it brought about a lot of, like, it brought up like a lot of childhood trauma. So I'm going back and I'm looking at my childhood, and I'm thinking about my dad, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, what was the purpose of you having me? Was it just like going through the motion? Was that just like an exercise of, you know, because obviously the way things work down here, we can all agree, it's alchemy, because this realm, all of the divine opposites are ripped apart, masculine, feminine, light and dark. And the way things work down here is alchemy. You know, when a man and woman come together, that's alchemy. And obviously this is a material world, mater, mother. You know, this world is, like I said, two things, patterns and matter, consent and intent, pater. That's the binary code, pater, patterns, the ones and the zeros, the binary code, and matter, mater, the material. So this place is, you know, to your point, I'm sorry, I can't see, Chase. Yeah, this place is two things. It's consent and intent. However, there are levels of that consent and intent, right? There's you as a child, that, you know, children, that's, you know, they have their own world, right? And I think too often adults put upon children, you
Imagine
know,
getting diagnosed by this guy, and he's just like, well, you know, like in this world, like sometimes you get sick, and sometimes
I'm gonna ask
like,
you,
your mother and your father.
Dr. Luke, if you could, like, if there's a question built into what you were kind of monologuing on, if you could ask that question briefly, because somebody has booted you to the back.
And I would like to share some feelings just in general as well in a moment.
I don't have a question. I was just saying that this realm is consent and intent. That's all I was saying.
Can I ask real quick before you go, how do you know that?
And you don't have the chat's consent to keep rambling, sorry.
But how do you know that it's a universal claim, right? And you're a particular human. I'm asking, how do you know this universal state of affairs?
How do I know
And
this
congrats on your
universal...
daughter too. Congrats on, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
It is.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, so I said, how I know this is that we both, my partner and I, came together and we decided.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think the question is bigger. It's bigger than just you and your partner, right? If it's a universal claim, like, you would have to back it up with something a little bit more substantial than just your personal experience with your wife.
Well, here, and I can try something real quick. So,
Okay.
You know, a lot of people don't know this, but you know, my parents passed away when I was very young, and I got, you know, adopted as an orphan. And for the longest time, I was kind of ostracized by my parents. But then over time, I started getting these invitations to this school, and it seemed like a really weird thing. And it wasn't just a normal invitation dropped off in the mail by a person. It was actually owls that just kept coming and dropping all of the letters off, and they just wouldn't stop. And eventually I found out I was a wizard.
You're Harry
And
Potter.
We
No,
might all
that has
burn in
nothing to do
hell
with
for
this.
this
That
one.
has
All right.
literally
The chat,
nothing to do with-
Dr. Luke, the chat has spoken. I'm going to let you go sit backstage for a little bit and think about it. And maybe when you come up, you can be a little more direct and clear with your thought process on that, aside from just your personal experience, maybe. And we'll
It was
get
nice
that
to meet you,
sorted
Dr. Luke.
out.
Nice to meet you,
Nice
Dr.
to
Luke.
meet you.
We will get it sorted out. Let me hit some
Can
super
I
chats
suggest
and
something?
then-
Okay, go ahead. I was going to say, when you're
let
done
me-
with that, I think it was I forgot his name on the bottom right corner.
Schoolboy.
I wanted to hear what he was getting at before his phone was messed up.
Fair enough. And let me get
Yeah,
through these,
so
and then Schoolboy, I'll hand it to you. S Mill comes in with a big 5. Do you know if dogs go to heaven? It's a binomial. You don't know, then you say they don't. I don't know. Do I have dyslexia? Am I reading this right?
Do I know if dogs go to heaven? I don't know. Either they do or they don't, right?
Are they actually
I think it
asking?
meant
Well,
if you, not I am.
Okay, thank you. That hurt my brain. If you don't know, then you say they don't. Okay, I see what he's saying. And Sarcastic Saint says, okay, sorry, that you sending him back. Chef Dylan, once Dr. Luke started kicking off, said no. And of course, lots of boots coming in for Dr. Monologue, Dr. Luke, Dr.
He's a nice guy. Nice guy.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's just with
I'm
this
sorry.
type
I have
of
to
group.
apologize. When he said we came together, I couldn't help myself.
I'd imagine so, especially coming from you, Sasquatch. Marcus with the Big 10 says, not a diary, bruv. Yes, dear personal, public, everybody diary. And Evan Lord comes in with a big 5. Confucius says that Dr. Luke is spewing a psychobabble. Kick him. Also, I meant the philosophy and philosophers Booth helped build and maintain religions. I think that was taking it back to what he was asking you earlier about the Persian thing.
Yeah.
And of course, Grid coming in with the boot as well. And Dr. Luke, will you give Duck his first frost? Jesus, Lord. When he turns 45 or 50, Duck also needs a lobotomy. James says, Scooby Dooby Doo and 5 minutes. So, James, you're getting 5 in the back as well. There we go. And Dub coming up. And I think, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Not you, Dub. We got new people back here. All right. There we go. Okay. I think we're all set. All right. Schoolboy, back to you, please.
So, yeah, I was talking about the Munchausen's trilemma, and that all worldviews, their epistemology is essentially grounded in one of 3 options, and that is infinite regress, circularity, or dogmatic assertions. Right? Okay. And when you were talking about the tag argument earlier, you kind of put it in this dichotomy, not looking at the third option, like the circularity, right? And Orthodox Christianity actually answers this in a very unique way, because the circularity isn't necessarily a problem for us. There's a difference between vicious circularity and virtuous circularity. And an example I could give you is that if we're having a semantic debate about what a word means in a conversation, right? By even having that debate, we're already presupposing that words have meaning. Right. So there is a recursion to that. It's not viciously circular in the aspect where like Protestantism would be with, oh, how do you know that? The Bible. Well, how do you know what the Bible says? The Bible. That's viciously circular. Orthodox Christianity doesn't fall into that same problem because we also hold the oral tradition and there's a historical continuity. But the tag argument is making the argument for an epistemologically holistic worldview, saying that the possibility of knowledge, there is no other foundational, I won't even say foundational because that's not right, but there is no other justification for the possibility of knowledge other than a theonomous worldview. And to even take it a step further, a revelatory framework. So you were talking about why couldn't it be grounded in like the Greek?
Yeah.
Because it would be begging the question if it was not revelatory.
So for example,
these assertions.
Yep. So for example,
ahead,
without any type of access through, first off, having the universe be intentional at a minimum, which is why I brought up that dichotomy before with the guy who could not even follow along. With the worldview being intentional, now you can even start getting moving and saying, okay, that's why we have order in things. That's why tomorrow will be like today. That's why water will still boil at the temperature it does today as it will tomorrow. And when you start getting into those universal claims of saying water's going to boil at Neil's house at the same temperature it's going to boil at Chase's house, you're getting into things that you're not empirically verifying. You're stuck in particular states of verification of instances like David Hume brought up. And without any type of revelatory theism to be able to account for and justify a universal state of affairs of water always boiling at a same temperature somewhere else, you're never going to be able to justify that ever. And if we don't have to justify it, we don't care about justifying it, we're going to go back in the problems that I was illustrating at the beginning of the conversation. That wasn't a dodge. That was to lay the groundwork for this, to show, hey, we can't go back there or you're going to have to forfeit an insane amount of stuff and everything's going to break.
Why does that have to be revelatory to know that water boils at a specific temperature, no matter where I'm at on the planet?
So you and me are particulars that are stuck in a certain instance of time, right? Seeing, well, every time I've seen water boil, it's been at this temperature, right? And let's just grant measurement and all that.
That's
right?
inductive
Let's just grant
reasoning,
for
right?
now.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. How are you going to be able to say, how are you going to be able to justify that it always will? You can't if you're stuck in just your particular instances of this material knowledge.
Right. It's inductive reasoning. Every time I've boiled water, it's always been at the same temperature. Therefore, if the likelihood of it boiling at the same temperature is extremely high. What's wrong with saying that?
You won't, because you won't be able to justify that likelihood claim. Where did that come from?
Right, but I can do an experiment and I can do it. I can't experiment and determine if the revelatory God of the Christian Bible is
the experiment is actually the argument that and the experiment, quote unquote, right? One second. The experiment, quote unquote, is, and the testing of it is seeing if your worldview can account for the very possibility of the things you're using right now to argue and to boil water. And sorry, schoolboy, I was cutting you off by accident.
But I can make worldview account for things. I can write up my own worldview that account for things and just make my own theories about things, and it can account for everything. Doesn't mean it's true.
You
it
can't,
seems like creating a problem
even...
that you didn't answer, right? Like that's what it feels like to me, because we sit in here and argue over it. Because I'm not a deep philosophy guy either. I only dabble. I'm a dabbler. But it seems to me
you say you're a diddler?
I'm a dabbler. A dabbler.
You're a diddler. It's cutting out. You just keep.
He's hitting the Cam Newton 2015.
I'm just playing.
I'm sorry. I guess, man.
I'm just playing, man. I'm just playing.
He's handing it to McCaffrey
because we keep talking about things as though they are things like outside of what my context that I keep them in. So like to me, like if belief is like a brain state where you're taking a proposition to be true, and then knowledge is just a belief that you hold to a certain degree of confidence. Because you guys aren't talking about like true knowledge. Knowledge can be false, right?
No, that's not knowledge.
That's not.
Well, it depends.
Your definition of knowledge is that it's true. It comports with reality.
Justified true belief, and sometimes you may need a fourth condition like non-accidental or something. That's where Gettier cases. We're fine with Gettier cases. That Gettier cases actually have nothing to do with the possibility of knowledge itself. Gettier cases assume that knowledge is possible, is what we're bringing into question.
So how do you get past any of this just being reality? Because reality is our basis for what objectivity and objective truth is, right?
Reality is what's in question right now. That's like the biggest claim you can ever make, and the most old question of all of philosophy is, what the heck is this stuff? It's all water, it's all fire, it's all this. That's the biggest question ever, and I can just say, okay, man, if you're okay with that level of philosophy and lack of it, cool, man. Like me and Schoolboy just deserve all your income, and we just do. It's just reality. You need to pay up. Neil, you need to give me your channel. You just need to do it.
I'm sorry.
I'm confused on something. Like our knowledge that we have is built on knowledge that precedes it, right? I mean, even like heliocentrism was built off of geocentrism, and just after a while, more observations, more hypotheses, we changed our model. So what would you define? Can't knowledge be false? Like what would you define that?
False information.
Yeah,
it's not real actual knowledge.
Yeah, and that's why we brought up you in your worldview. Obviously, you can define something as you want, and we can talk about that, right? We, in our worldview, knowledge is a justified true belief, and sometimes you may need a fourth condition, like non-accidental or something. We don't need those for meta-level arguments, though. That's a whole different question of like Gettier cases and stuff. So justified true belief, you can't have false knowledge just based on our definition, just analytically. You can't. That doesn't answer the question of knowledge being possible. That's just analytically true. It's not in our definition.
So you're just defining knowledge as something that is true depending on what people believe. That's knowledge.
A justified meaning you have good reasons to believe, and obviously we can get into good reasons. And I'm not ever asking people for some exhaustive definition of something, right? Because I agree. It's like, no, our predicates are going to end up at a spot where we just have to say, well, there's an essence or a nature of this thing. I can't fully define what that thing is, but I can account for things, right? And essences. So justified true belief is our definition of knowledge. So justified good reasons to believe, which backing that up a little bit more broad, reasons that are coherent and that actually logically link together to what you're saying is the case, right? Like your bank account, you know how much money you usually make a month. You can have a justified belief of how much money you're going to make this month. I hope you make really good money this month. It may not be true. Could be. You could have good reasons to believe it, and it could not be true. You could make more, right? But you have good reasons to believe it.
Sure.
Based on track record and stuff like that. Blah, blah, blah.
Sorry. I just wanted to kind of like talk about the justified thing real quick. Like when we're talking about like justified true belief in terms of like, because you said Gnostic, that is it something that people just believe in? It would be something that we believe in insofar as it being having explanatory power, right? It actually having the ability to explain something in a coherent method, rather than, because people can believe things all day long, but if they're incapable of actually showing how that system that they believe in would be coherent and actually follow a proper set of systems that would make something true in the first place, then they wouldn't be a justified true belief in any way, shape, or form. It would simply just be considered information rather than knowledge, which wouldn't be the
same. And I got to
thing.
jump in for just a sec. It's getting late. I have to get up at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow. Neil, it's really good to see you. Sarah, thanks for having me up. Man. Nice to meet you. I gotta reach out to you. I remember like last year we were like you were on a stream and I was in your chat. We're like, oh yeah, let's chat. Schoolboy, Bryce, they're awesome. Sarah, they're really cool. I don't know if you met them before, but before they go, whenever they do, you should give them a chance to shout out their stuff. They're really cool. Thanks for having me on. Hope everybody has a good night. Have a good night, Neil. See you guys.
Good night, Chase.
All right, well, you're hurting my feelings, Chase.
All right, so let me ask you this. I have a lot of questions right now that I would like to go, and I'm trying to think of which the best course. But I would, I guess, if I was, for example, I'm a Taoist priest, and I say the Tao accounts for all knowledge. What would you say to refute that under the same circular tag argument? The Tao accounts for all knowledge. The Tao is the precondition for all knowledge. How do you disapprove that under your worldview?
So, like, what about the Tao? Like, how so?
The Tao, it counts for all things.
I mean, it goes back to like the explanatory power thing, right? So if you make that claim.
Yeah, that's not what we do with tag, by the way. So you may have like talked to people that are very poor at giving the positive account or even arguing tag accurately. And that's why I was kind of going into that earlier, saying like, okay, yes, we have the modus ponens, we have God is a necessary precondition for knowledge, therefore God, right? That is a sound and valid form of argumentation. It's just boilerplate.
Saying good sound is
what's the difference
begging a lot in there.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand. What was the difference between the way you just phrased it and me saying that the Christian God is the precondition of all knowledge, therefore knowledge is based on or is grounded and justified by God? What's the difference?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
If I said, I'll even use the Taoist frameworks because just so I can want to hear how you the Tao is the precondition for all knowledge. Okay. Now the Tao is the precondition for all knowledge.
Necessary precondition.
Yeah, knowledge is
that is very important.
The necessary. I'm sorry. Say that again. The necessary precondition for all knowledge.
Blank is the necessary precondition for blank. Blank, therefore blank.
Just set your foundation. Set your foundation. So you're trying to make an argument, and you're trying to make an argument now.
It's classical foundationalism.
Sure.
Set your foundation.
So you're saying there's a difference between throwing the word necessary in there and not throwing the word necessary in there?
Absolutely.
What does that word necessary do compared to me just saying it?
Set your foundation.
I kind of implied
something would be a
Hold
massive
on,
difference
bro. Hold
between
on, bro.
determining
Hold on.
something is
Just
contingent
hold
or
on.
necessary.
For like Scooby or whatever. Just hold on. If you truly are a particular priest, then go ahead and explain all the beliefs that you
I
have.
didn't say I was a priest.
No, you're
Gramps,
asking me.
Come on, we were having a conversation.
Oh, I thought he was talking to me. I'm sorry.
So then you just made up a scenario in which you have no knowledge on anything. So
You're
what's
talking
your
about me?
problem?
No,
Yeah.
he's talking to me, Neil. He's just yapping.
No, I'm not. No,
he's
I'm talking
to me. I'm using the Tao as an example, and okay, fine. But you notice how if I said the Tao is the necessary precondition of all knowledge, right away I'm getting asked, explain why the Tao is the. I'm waiting for someone to explain to me why the Orthodox God is the I'm still have not heard anything yet. Nothing.
Okay, so would you like to hear that or no?
That's what I was trying to get to.
Yes.
That's what I've been trying to get to, Gramps. Like,
Go ahead. Go ahead, schoolboy. Finish your thought.
Yeah, finish.
So I'm just laying out the argument in the proper format for you because it seemed like you have encountered people that are arguing it poorly in the past. So I'm showing you the modus ponens, and then anyone that rejects the modus ponens, they'll ask, what's the justification for that? And then it becomes the disjunctive, that knowledge is either theonomous or not theonomous. And it is not theonomous.
Let's say that it is. Let's say that it is.
Yep. And then they go, okay, what's the justification for that? And then it becomes a form of informal argumentation via reductio ad absurdum of all other worldviews. So if you posit something that could possibly be a precondition, we would then take a look inside, take a look around, do an internal critique, and see if it's actually coherent.
What's the difference between me doing that to you?
So this is an argument. This is an argument from ignorance in this form. Saying this particular worldview is false is going to never imply that my particular worldview is true.
Well,
you can show, hey, Gnostic informant is incorrect.
Hold
You can show Gnostic informant is
I
incorrect.
didn't hear what you said. Sorry. Repeat that again.
So this is just a basic argument from ignorance. We can show, even if we grant Gnostic informant, your worldview is false. Saying Gnostic informant's worldview is false doesn't imply Eastern Orthodoxy is correct.
That's what I've been trying to say this entire time.
Yeah.
It's just a classical form of an argument from ignorance.
So no, you'd figure out what it is.
It's
an argument from. Okay, can anyone else speak? Because it's an argument from a postulate. So now we're all at postulate scenario, and we're having to try to figure out things and reason with one another in a way that we can understand. That's what we're trying to do here.
The most this can ever get to is Schoolboy NQ's worldview is more justified than Gnostic informants by saying Gnostic informants worldview is incorrect. That never gets to Schoolboy NQ's worldview is false based on the truth value of Gnostic informants.
No, but here's the problem. Here's the problem.
Dub, you asked a question. You gotta shut up to let them answer.
So we have been through this multiple times. Schoolboy, I'm gonna give you the view. We can have the truth table that includes your view, and we have the truth table that involves Gnostic informant's view. Gnostic's going to be Q, yours is going to be P. Gnostic's view, Q false, Q true. We can get the implication of if Gnostic's view is true, then your view is false because there's a difference there. That's always going to be implied. But we can never get to
I would agree
because
if
Gnostic's
that is the
view
case.
is false. We can't get to the view of if Gnostic's view is false, therefore Schoolboy's view is true. That doesn't follow.
Okay, so internally. Okay, can I respond? Or Bryce, would you like to respond?
I was about to say that, like, in terms of like,
I don't think you've had the pleasure of interacting with Corinth yet, so I'll give you a chance.
No, you're fine. So, like, when we're talking about like P or Q, like when we're doing it in a disjunctive format, we're making the positive claim that P would be directly our position, and then Q would be the alternate position, right? And if you're going to basically postulate the Q as your position, then you'd have to represent that position.
So
what are you talking about? Hold on. Do you think that there's a difference? No, hold on. Do you think that there's a third option other than theonomous and not theonomous?
Okay, so that's not what we're positing here. We're not positing theonomous versus non-theonomous. We're positing Schoolboy's view versus Gnostic's view. There is the third option.
The Tao would be autonomous.
There's the fourth option. There's Corinth's view. There's the fifth option. There's Abe Dinkus's view. We can never get to, well, P through not Q. We can only get to not Q given P.
Yeah. So when we're talking, that's why it would be considered a reductio ad absurdum of all other possibilities to make Q the case or P the case.
And that has nothing to do with Gnostic's view. You can do the reductio absurdum of all
if
other
Gnostic
views
is holding a
without it.
position, if Gnostic is holding a position that specifically is attempting to go against P in the way that we're positing it, and then he's incapable of that at that time. I'm not saying you are Gnostic, but I'm saying, like, for the sake of the argument, if he's incapable of providing a justification for Q in the first place, or he's incapable of even representing Q because he just postulates, like, for example, like another position, like the Tao, for example, if he's incapable of actually like representing the Taoist position, then positing it as an option is just a non sequitur.
That doesn't. That's not a non sequitur. Directly
Yes, it
saying
would.
this is an
He can't
option
represent.
is
He can't
showing that
represent
the binary is
alternate.
false.
Because he can't
That's
represent
not
the alternate,
saying it's a
meaning he can't
non-binary.
actually show that P is not the case because he
Okay,
can't
so
represent Q correctly.
let's think this through. So, do you think that all true views are justified views?
All true
Hold
views,
on.
I believe, there's only
Corinne,
one true view.
do you believe
I'm
that
asking,
truth
all
exists?
there are multiple true views. Yes,
You're
I
a
do. First of all,
fallibilist.
but there are multiple. There are multiple true
You're a
views. There are
fallibilist.
something.
Yeah, I mean, I deny that.
Yes, I am a fallibilist. That's a claim about knowledge. That's not a claim about truth, schoolboy.
Yeah, I mean,
so again,
I
I'm going
deny
to
that there's
so
multiple
we can
true
have
views.
a true. Okay, so is there a
Call
true
something
view
true, which
where
you not
my
have to have
car
knowledge
is
of that?
outside my house right now, and then there's a true view that there's a rock outside my house right now, and those two views are non-identical?
That wouldn't be a paradigm, by the way.
They're not.
Did I say it was a paradigm, or did I say there are multiple true
This
views?
this argument has to do with paradigms. So your argument is literally,
And this
has
is a
nothing to do
complete
with.
non sequitur that you're doing right now. You're trying to.
I'm
get
trying
out of
to
the question.
actually. I'm trying to stay on topic. You're the one that's bringing it towards just observable data.
Okay,
Speaking
so
of
I'm
going
giving you
off
the.
topic,
That's the first
James,
question.
can you please say Scooby Doo Doo for the audience?
I was
Saint
wondering when I
Martin.
was gonna come up. Scooby
Sorry,
Doo.
that's good enough for me. Okay, Corinth, back to you.
Okay, so I asked the prior question. Now that we clarified, I'm not asking in terms of paradigms here. Are all, if we have all, are all justified views true views, or are all true views justified views?
If we're not talking about a paradigm.
Yep.
I'd say that you still have to have some form of paradigm to make the case for any of those observable things.
Was that a question I asked you, or?
Yes.
So the question I asked you was, do you need a paradigm, or was it all true views?
To make a truth statement, yes, you need a paradigm, Corinth.
That wasn't the question I asked you, Bryce.
So
I didn't ask you about can you make
I
a
did
statement.
answer that question.
I didn't ask you, can you make a statement? I asked you, are all true views justified views?
That is, dude. That's
Can
literally
there be an unjustified view
that's
that is
making a
also
statement
true?
about a truth value. That's making a statement about a truth value.
I'm asking you a question right now.
I
So
answered
I'm
your-
asking
I
you an
answered you.
affirmation of this or not. You're not answering the question I asked you.
In terms of affirming a truth, that requires a paradigm. So it
Did I
does
ask you
eventually
to
get back
affirm the
that.
truth, or did I
Are you
ask
just
you,
not gonna?
is
Are you
this-
not gonna engage with the fact that you're being disingenuous with this argument?
I'm not being disingenuous right now. You're not answering the question.
The entire
Can you
point
tell
of the,
me
of
what
the
was the answer
argument
to the
that's being
question?
made
Are all true views justified views?
are all true views justified views within
Yes.
a paradigm?
Categorically.
Categorically within a paradigm?
Categorically.
Within what?
Do you think that truth is contingent on a mind?
Theory neutral?
Bryce, do you think truth is contingent on a mind?
I do, yes.
Okay, so then you're just a subjectivist at this point.
No,
I'm not a subjectivist.
because that mind is
that
not grounded in
definitionally
me.
by saying I think this is dependent on a mind, you are a subjectivist.
So you
This
think
is
truth?
just
You
fitting
think
the
truth
definition.
exists in a vacuum?
Yes, I
Minds
think
exist without
truth,
brains.
things are true or not, regardless of if there's a mind or not.
Okay, so truth exists in a vacuum.
I don't think you need a mind to say, well, that
How are you
planet
able to
was
grasp?
there.
How are you
5
able to
seconds
grasp
ago.
what a truth is if it's in a vacuum?
Oh, I can't grasp it without a vacuum because that's me being a mind. That's not
Yeah,
the question I
yeah.
asked you, and this is you again trying to pivot off of it.
How did I pivot?
Because the question originally was, are all true views justified views? And you still not given
Within
a
a
yes or no
paradigm.
answer to the yes or no question.
Because it's not a yes or no question. You're actually
Okay, can you
you're
tell me the
literally-
third
You're
option?
literally asking a complex question and requiring a simple answer. It's
Can you
fallacy.
tell me why the law of excluded middle doesn't apply in this given case?
Within what, the P or Q?
No, in the are all true views justified views?
If
This
it's
is a yes or
within-
no
if it's
question. You're
within a
saying
par-
it's
if
not a
it's
yes or no
within a
question,
paradigm, if
which
it
is
is
going to
within
say,
a
well, there's a
paradigm,
third
yeah.
option that's violating the principle of bivalence, the law of excluded middle, whatever theory of logic you hold to.
Do you
You're
not
going
have
to go
it? Do
outside
you not
of
need a
this. This might
paradigm
be
to
where the
affirm it?
disconnect is.
Do you not need a paradigm to affirm those things?
You might, but that's not the question I'm
So
asking
you, so you think that that stuff is theory neutral?
Can you give me an answer to the question?
I have been answering you this entire time. I don't know
So
why. I don't know
you've
why
been
you're not
answering
tracking.
the yes or no question.
It's not just a yes or no question. It's a yes
So
insofar
the principle
as
of bivalence
actually.
doesn't obtain in this case. Can you tell me why the principle of bivalence, the
It would
law
be
of
a yes.
excluded middle,
It
one
would
of
be
the
a
most
yes
principal
insofar
foundational
as
aspects of
declaring
logic
your
today?
paradigm. It would be a yes insofar as declaring your paradigm. I just said that.
Motherfucker, what just happened?
I don't know why you're crashing out.
You're
I'm being
refusing to accept a person's answer because you're trying to insist on one of two answers, and he's saying it's
Is it
right.
the yes or no? Are all A's B?
You say it's a yes or a no, but in reality,
Sasquatch,
there
is there
are
a third
layers.
option to are all A's B than yes or no?
If it's in a paradigm, then
Wow.
yes,
What are
you
you,
could
a
say that.
programmer?
Okay, Bryce, what do you mean by if it's in a paradigm?
Yeah, so like if somebody's holding to, for example, like an empirical materialist view, if they say all true things are justified, right, they would have to determine on what brings something to truth in the empirical view. So if we're able to come to the conclusion via observation or something like the scientific method that those things are true, you can say that all true things within empiricism are true because they're proven through observation and the scientific method and things like that. So again, your question is not a simple. It's not just a simple question.
Actually,
it's a complex question.
Non-answer.
No,
right?
no. You're asking a complex question and requiring a
It
simple
might be
answer, which is
complex to you if
disingenuous
you're
in nature.
as stupid as you're presenting yourself to be.
I understand that you're like
So
crashing
just to
out,
be
brother.
clear,
But like I'm chilling here.
this
So
isn't
I
a
don't know why
crash
you're.
out.
I don't know
The
why you're freaking
question
out.
in direct form is: are all A's B? You've affirmed
Within a
that's not a
paradigm.
yes or no question.
Yeah, it
Are
has to
all
depend
A's
on
B?
how we apprehend
Are
that truth
all
in the first
A's
place.
identical to B? This is not something that's either yes or no.
This is insane, bro. I don't know how you're not tracking what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's insane that you're refusing to answer a direct question.
I
You've
answered
gone
a direct
into
question
hard
multiple
subjectivism
times,
to this
and then I
point.
explained it. Can you
You
explain how
pivoted
I'm
to
being
subjectivism.
subjective? Can you explain
So
how I'm subjective?
this might be sure. Subjective is going to be something that truth is mind dependent. That's truth subjectivism.
Yeah,
which is
but I
something
don't-
you
yeah, but
directly affirm.
The mind that I ground that truth in, though, is not mine.
That
or any
doesn't
other
have
human being.
anything to do with if
Wait,
you're
we don't ground it
subjectivist.
in a particular
If
mind.
I
We
say,
ground it in a
okay, I'm
universal
grounding
mind.
a Gnostic informant's mind. It's not my mind. Am I
Okay,
still
what is his
subjectivist,
what
Bryce?
is his position?
I'm just grounding truth in his mind. Am
Yeah,
I still
so- okay,
subjectivist,
so-
or
so
does
it's
me
just
saying, well, it's
arbitrary
not
then.
my mind work?
Then it would just be considered arbitrary. Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with if it's a subjectivist position or not, which is why I'm asking you that, and I'm not sure again why you're not answering the direct question.
It wouldn't be considered just subjectivist because I just told you that mine would be grounded
It
in
is. You
universal
just
mind.
don't
No,
know
it's
what
not.
subjectivist
You have no
means.
idea what the difference
It
between
can be a
universal and
universal
particulars are.
subjectivist if the mind is universal.
A
but you're still
universal
grounding in a mind.
subjectivist. A universal subjectivist.
Yes, universal and objective
Are all
not
particulars
identical.
bound by that universal truth?
This is your view, so maybe you're asking me
Maybe.
questions about your view at this point.
No, I'm asking because you just said universal subjectivism.
Yeah, that's the form you're taking right
please,
now.
Yeah, explain
That's-
that. Explain that.
So universal is going to be something like this applies in all cases. Objective is going to say this is a mind independent fact.
Yeah,
So
mind
the
independent
planet
of human
exists-
beings, right?
A planet exists 1 foot under me right now. That's not a universal claim because at any point in the universe, the me being referenced there could not have a planet under them, but it is an objectively true statement that's showing objective and universal are not identical. We can say,
Yeah,
well,
that would-
it's
that would depend on
objectively
your paradigm for
100
it to be the
feet
case.
to my house right now. This can be objectively incorrect for my point, but that's not a universal thing because there are points 100 feet away from my house.
Yeah, that would be entirely dependent on the paradigm whether or not those things are true or not.
Okay, what aspect of the paradigm is going to falsify if the planet exists?
Whether the planet exists, whether or not you actually affirm that
Paradigms are
reality is-
ideas of beliefs. You can affirm false
yeah,
things, Bryce.
Yeah, paradigms are actually
You affirm a lot of false
foundations-
things.
No, I mean that good claim, dude. So in terms
you do.
of the paradigm, oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you can just throw claims
Okay,
around.
so are you going to
So-
make the claim that
I'm
paradigms
still
are
trying.
non-beliefs?
I'm still trying to figure out how a universal subjectivist mindset is possible.
Sure, because you can.
Because
have
you said that I affirm
You're
that,
saying
so
the
what is that?
mind applies in all universal areas, but it's still a mind which you're grounding in, which is going to be definitionally subjectivist, and you're going to make
No,
it
it's not.
definitionally universal.
No, subjectivism implies that there are particular ideas. There are particular.
That's not at all
concepts.
true. You just
Yes,
don't
it
know
is.
what you're talking about here.
Oh, okay.
You just fundamentally don't know the term you're using at this point, which is not unexpected given your
Subjectivism
views.
would be considered mind dependent, equal
Yes.
to other minds, right?
No, that's not
Oh.
all.
So there can be.
The first
So there
part
can
you
be.
said
What would
is
make
correct,
something?
actually.
What would make something objective regarding this?
It being a mind independent thing.
A mind
Things that are
independent thing.
objective are mind independent. Things that are subjective are mind dependent.
Can you give me
That's
can
what
you give me
those
an
two words
example?
mean
Can
in
you give
this
me an example of something that would be entirely mind independent without implying that there would be no
Sure.
form of
The
paradigm
Earth
involved?
existing right below
That's
us.
literally
Whether or not we
mind
have
independent.
minds here, the fact of the matter is the Earth is still going. So we can remove every mind in
Good
the
claim.
universe.
Good claim.
Sure,
Again.
Bryce. If we removed every mind in the universe, does that change anything about the ontology of the Earth?
We haven't even gotten to the fact that the ontology
Yes or
of the
no,
Earth is
Bryce?
a thing. It's not a simple yes or no.
Yes or no, Bryce?
It's not a simple yes or no yet again.
Again, if we remove all other minds in the universe, does this change the ontology of the Earth?
We don't even know if
Not
the
a
Earth
yes or
exists
no
yet.
question.
We haven't even
Bryce,
established
you
whether the
can't
Earth exists
answer
or
a
not.
direct question.
I have answered multiple times.
No, you haven't.
You're
You've been
literally
dodging
you're
repeatedly.
presupposing the Earth exists already.
Do you reject that the Earth exists?
I don't, but that's irrelevant to your argument.
Okay, so we share this belief.
That's
We can
irrelevant to the
analyze this
argument.
belief.
Oh, okay. So then we
You can
just
analyze this
concede,
belief
right?
then.
We just concede.
Is
then,
the
right?
truth value of this is completely irrelevant to this idea.
I ground the fact that there's ontology in the Earth in a different way than you do.
Okay, what do you ground it in, Bryce?
I ground it in the mind of God. The fact that
Okay,
that God
justify
created
this.
the Earth. What do you mean
Justify that if
justify it?
God's
the
mind
impossibility
didn't
of the
exist.
contrary.
Sure, show me the impossibility of the contrary to the Earth doesn't exist if the mind of God does not exist.
That's literally not even my argument. That has
That's the
nothing to do with
impossibility of the
argument.
contrary to the thing you said you were grounding it in, retard. Can you fucking answer the question?
Now I'm gonna get banned from TikTok. GG's. So, are you able to use regular language?
Are you able to answer a question?
I am. I've answered multiple times.
No, you haven't. You've dodged repeatedly. And now
I
you're just
haven't.
saying
You
that's not
literally
the
keep
position.
asking.
When you literally said, yes, this is the view. I'm grounding in the impossibility of the contrary. So I ask you, okay, you show me how it is impossible for this view to not be the case. And then you say that's not the view.
Yeah, so when
Bryce,
you say
you are a
mind
retard.
independent. Oh my gosh, bro. So in terms of a mind independent fact, right? That's implying that that thing
This is an answer to the
completely
question
true
of
external to
how
the
is
mind.
this thing impossible on the contrary?
You are
How?
making that claim that obviously the Earth exists.
No, I'm
outside of the
asking you to
existence of the mind.
justify the claim
You made that
that your
claim.
belief is impossible to the contrary. I'm asking you to justify that belief.
You
now.
made that claim yourself. You made the claim yourself that the Earth
So,
exists
Bryce, how
outside
did
of a
you
mind.
justify the impossibility of the contrary to the Earth can't exist?
Are you
if the
just
mind
not?
of
Are
God
you not
doesn't
going to
exist?
address the fact that you've been doing that this whole time?
You're
What the thing I've been
pivoting right
saying?
now.
How am I
You're
pivoting?
pivoting because I'm asking you the direct question to justify the belief you said that the Earth cannot exist absent the mind of God due to the impossibility of the contrary. I'm asking you to justify the impossibility of the contrary. This particular
You
belief.
moved into
and
that.
you said
Alright,
this is not
You
the view.
moved into that.
Because I asked you a question, you
Freaking-
said, I'm justifying this differently than you. I'm
It's
justifying
not
it through
gonna
this
go well.
means. I'm asking you to justify it because you refuse to just take it for granted for the sake of the argument, despite the fact that the truth value of this
No.
thing in particular
You literally
does
have no
not
idea
matter.
what
Whether or
I'm
not it's the
getting
value
at.
of the
You have no idea what
Gentlemen,
I'm getting at.
Sasquatch, I'd like you to translate, but first, Wi-Fi coming in with the big five says Bryce is eating rabbit meat tonight. Removing all minds assumes Earth exists without God. L.
They're disagreeing on the language of language and how one believes that all things can be pretty well squared away in the frame of God, and the other believes that everything is squared away in the frame of language. And in that disagreement, that tiny little bit is their entire argument.
Pretty much.
Now I'm gonna take a shot.
Would anybody else like to
not
add
the
their
case at
thought
all.
process in here?
That was fascinating.
I think
Yeah,
Sasquatch
Corinne,
is
just
somewhat
how
good.
do you know that there's any actual truth value to your arguments?
because there's a justified belief there that I think is also true.
Think
And
it's true.
Right, but that doesn't.
Can I ask one
How can
question
you
before I go?
justify that and ground
Sure.
Can I
that?
ask one question before I go? Schoolboy, can you show how it's impossible for you to be wrong that there's gas in my car, right? Or impossible for me to be incorrect that there's gas in my car right now? Or anyone out there in the audience that they
Good job
can't
assuming
be wrong.
empiricism.
I'm asking a direct question. I'm not assuming empiricism. I'm asking to justify a thing. You don't understand how this works, Bryce. So again, can you justify how anyone out there that has the belief that, oh, I filled up my car today, there's gas in my car, doesn't actually have knowledge there's gas in the car because it's possible they sprung a leak because a mouse crawled into the gas tank, bit something out there. That's some possibility showing they're not certain of that belief. There's not a certainty existing in this point. And that means it's not knowledge
No,
because you're
you're-
implying
you're-
fallibilism implies not knowledge. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, so within our
Alright.
paradigm, in theosis, knowledge does not just extend to the temporal. So there is even access to knowledge that is outside of time and space. And also knowledge of things that are within time and space.
That would be grounded in things called the divine logi, which is also called the reflections of the divine mind, right?
And then you're also assuming minds, right? I mean,
in terms of what?
Well, mind has to exist as well. Like, where's it? I don't know. There's got to be.
I mean, in order to be able to postulate any fact, right?
Yeah.
In order to make a proposition.
Yeah.
But you're assuming that minds without brains exist, right?
This music is so groovy. What'd you say? All right, say that again. Sorry, what'd you say? I was vibing to that.
Said, but part of your assumption is that a mind that is not contingent on a brain exists, right?
Yeah, I hold to the position that it's not necessary for a brain to exist in order for a mind to be the case.
And what do you ground that position in?
I ground that in God. The fact that we ground that in God.
It always
just a
comes
special
back,
attribute to it.
It always
isn't
comes
that
back
kind of special
to the
pleading?
given, though. Well,
How is
but
it
it always
special pleading?
comes
It's a
back
paradigm.
to the given.
Because the only minds we have examples of in reality are the ones that are contingent upon a brain.
So you ground it entirely in observation, then, right? Empiricism.
Sure, I suppose so. Yeah.
Okay, so then with that being said, that's when the reductio ad absurdum comes in terms of determining all knowledge whatsoever via that method. That's the issue, right? So like you can make a claim within your paradigm, of course, saying like, well, I don't have the ability to justify such within like an empirical method, right? Because I don't follow empiricism. So when I say that a mind can exist external to a brain, right? Like that's something that you obviously affirm. And when you tell me to justify that, right? Like we're talking about something within a philosophical context, not in an empirical observational context.
Right. So you're saying your paradigm allows you to simply assert things without having to prove them. That's
not an
essentially
assertion.
what you just
It's-
said. I
it's-
mean, it
it's
is an
literally
assertion, right? Like
no, it's a foundation rooted in a paradigm. It's not the
like
same
it's all
thing.
an assertion. Like
I mean, your situation would also be just as much of an assertion if you're making.
I mean,
a claim.
but I encounter minds that are
You
in
encounter
brains,
minds?
right? Yes,
I have a
I
question.
encounter minds all the time. They're walking around in bodies.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, what are we talking about?
I wanted to ask Andy. Andy, I'm sure you are excited for this topic. Do you have any thoughts to add in?
I don't really know what was said, so I apologize if I repeat stuff. I kind of jumped in a little bit late here. But I saw a Gnostic Informants opening, and I just wonder if there's a better sort of way we can format the argument for Christianity in particular, where we can approach it from how do you reconcile the one and the many, like a philosophical problem, because you've been talking about like Aristotle, Plato in your opening a little bit. And I don't think that they reconcile the one and the many that well, but I think that the idea of a triune God can. So that would be my approach, where
They
if
had
we're thinking
triads
about
in Pythagorean and Platonist circles too. There was
yeah, but the question is how are the one and the many and relation, how do those come together, right? And so those triads aren't going to be the same as the idea of the triune God.
You said I think the triune God accounts for it better. How do you know that? How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I didn't even give my argument yet, so
Okay.
let me just set that up, and we can go from there maybe. So I think if we think about like all knowledge requires, and you can disagree with these definitions if you want, but I'm saying all knowledge requires the reconciliation of the one and the many, or unity and diversity. So you can think of, people have been talking about universals, particulars, laws, data, subject and object. Quick note on that though. I think the part of the problem between Corinth and Bryce was Corinth was using subject and object post Descartes, and Bryce is using subject and object pre Descartes, and they essentially just flipped their meanings. So they were talking past each other, I think. So that might be one issue. But anyway, so all intelligible knowledge requires this reconciliation of the one and the many. And then I would say only a worldview with both unity and diversity in its ultimate foundation can provide the necessary preconditions for intelligibility or intelligible knowledge, I guess you could say. And so the doctrine of the Trinity is unique in that sense because it uniquely posits both unity in the divine essence and diversity in three hypostases. So as equally ultimate in God, right? They're equally ultimate. There's not a hierarchy like in Plotinus or something. So that's where I would start.
Right, but how did you get to the
argument though? You just basically just said it's unique because it's the same but different, because it's many and one. Like that's all you said, right?
Well, I guess my issue with it is that how do you even get to the point where you're determining what characteristics better suit the triune God versus Plotinus to begin with? How do you even know like which one's better? Like the triune is better.
Why does that matter for the? So okay, that seems to be two questions. So the first one seems to be, how do you know what is attributed to the triune God? Is that correct? Versus Plotinus.
Yeah, like,
and I
like
would just say from the writings, from Plotinus's writings, and from Scripture.
But you kept saying, I think that this one better accounts for things than this one. Where does how do you even get to the point where you decide that Christian or Orthodox Christianity is the only worldview that accounts for everything besides other worldviews? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I'm saying that you have to start with the problem of the one and the many, which I think is a neutral problem. It's a philosophical problem we've had from the beginning of time. From the beginning of writing.
That's true. That's the play.
So don't you think it's relevant to ask the question that we have to reconcile the one and the many, or do you think that's not a problem?
You're talking about the problem of universals and like Platonism and stuff.
Well, universal in particular, that's one and many. But there's just the problem of one and many in general. How do those relate? How do they come together?
How does simple go to complex?
You would need a substantive reconciliation of it. You wouldn't need an epistemic reconciliation of it. Like, I don't need to know the difference here for this thing to obtain, though, right? A worldview can be grounded in there being a substantive answer without me having epistemic access to that substantive answer.
You're saying, so reword that, because I think I grasp what you're saying, but I don't know that it's so relevant to my argument.
I mean, so the reason I'm bringing this up, I'll add that in the end, but I'm asking, do we need to, when you're saying we need to reconcile this, do we need to get a substantive reconciliation, or do we need to get also an epistemic reconciliation? So do we need to have access to knowledge for this thing? The reason I'm bringing this up is the arguments being put forward to Gnostic from everyone else here are relating to the epistemic access to it, not to the substantive matter.
And for all of us, blondies out there, Kissy Cat sends a big 5 and says, let's try it with less than 7 letters, please. With words, less than 7 letters, please. Yes, I'm having a total brain fart because this is way, way beyond my understanding, and it is frying my brain. But yes,
I could try to do some double speak from like 1984 or something if you'd like.
So Andy, when you were basically positing to me, like, wouldn't you agree that the problem of the one and the many needs to be solved before you're even grounded in the Christian worldview or the Orthodox worldview? Why did you go to that question rather than any other question? What made you go to that question? Because
knowledge, in my view, is the ability to grasp at things and relate them. So you have something you're grasping, and you have something you're relating, and you have, within that grasping, you have universals, particulars, and you have the relation of those two.
Right. And so
I'm just trying to start like as basic as possible there.
Okay. And
I'm not Orthodox, by the way. I don't know if you're using Orthodox in the technical sense or if you're using it as just like Orthodox and heterodox.
Okay. And what branch of Christianity are you? Just wondering.
I'm Lutheran.
Lutheran. Oh, interesting. And so how did you decide that the Lutheran Church was the religion that?
Well, I don't think that relates to this argument.
Why not?
Because the triune God is part of the Orthodox faith, the Lutheran faith, the Christian faith in general. If you don't believe in the triune God, you're not Christian.
Gnostic. Gnostic. I was curious if I could ask Andy something real quick, just regarding that specifically. So Andy, the main reason, like I actually kind of see like why Gnostic would be asking that to you, right? So like in the Lutheran Church, right? Do you believe that in order to be a Lutheran, you have to affirm the Book of Concord?
To be a confessional Lutheran, yeah.
Yeah. If you're not a confessing Lutheran, then what happens?
You're not a confessional Lutheran.
Okay. With that being said, in order to be a Lutheran, right, to affirm the true doctrine of Christianity in that sense, right, would you say that the Book of Concord is infallible?
No, we have the Norma Normans and the Norma Normata, which is the norming norm and the norm. Scripture is the norm. Book of Concord is the norming norm.
Yeah, the known knowns and then the unknown knowns and then the known unknowns. Yeah.
That's not the same thing.
I know. I'm just playing. That's what it sounded like. So, regarding like the Book of Concord, for example, like being able to affirm.
Well, I don't look.
This
is just a totally different argument. You want to go into this idea of like, okay, authority, scripture. This is not at all what I'm arguing.
I mean, it would all go into the epistemology, but I mean, just to not get it off track, you and I can just be on the same side for the sake of the argument. I don't mind.
Yeah, I think if you affirm the triune God, you can.
So we're just going to go with a triune Christian God in general.
You can always leave it to the ortho-bros.
Well, the thing is,
fair enough.
Again, and I mean, and I'm not trying to drag this down, but it kind of gets into that whole simplistic fallacy. Like, what do you mean by the triune God then? Because the metaphysics that he's going to hold to this God, when it comes to, because he affirms the filioque, we don't. So
yeah,
we
but
would say
okay.
he
So
doesn't believe in the same God.
John of Damascus says that we have one
Careful,
substance.
careful what you say right now.
I mean, yeah, I have a YouTube series started on his Orthodox faith. You should go check it out. So he says one substance, three hypotheses.
By the way,
it doesn't matter. One substance, three hypotheses is all we need to talk about this. That's all we need to talk about this. One substance, one ousia, three hypotheses. That's it. Don't need to talk about the filioque.
I mean, I would agree
or
there.
not. Okay, so why are you going into this? That's not even the argument.
I'm drop my stream, and I'd like to get my question in. I've been very, very patient. A little bit of an asshole, but very patient. Were humans on the earth before Christianity?
What is that?
Who are you asking? Me?
Who are you asking, Squatch?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Yes. Okay, yes. Yes.
I can answer. I'll answer this real quick. To be clear, Christianity is not a quote unquote new religion. It is the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, in the person of Jesus Christ. The faithful Jews followed Christ because they had faith in God and they saw that he was the promised Messiah. So you're making this.
Okay, I understand. I understand.
The answer is yes, Sasquatch.
I accept your answer, and I also accept yes. Either way, right? Because man had to be here for God to give unto him his son, for him to that whole thing. It sort of comes to me.
It's the same faith.
Was there morality before the Trinity?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But wait, before the Trinity, no. He is the ground. I'm sorry, I was pre-firing your question.
I was going to say that was when you said yes, that really confused me. But okay, now
yeah,
I
did.
I was a little confused myself, but still, I'm going to get that.
Sasquatch. Let me put it like this, right? Because like in our position, of course, like the first human beings ever, Adam and Eve, right? Like they obviously believed in God, right? Right. So like with that being said, like if God is triune, then they understood that as well. All right. So then with that being said, then the Trinity has always been the case, and the first human beings also were a part of that same system.
And this will be it. Now I'll step out, pull my stream down, and move on with the rest of my life. And I love each and every one of you like a brother and sister. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom of Ur, and none of these people knew a thing about God. Did they have morality?
They had their own set of morality, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bye,
Sasquatch.
Shout out to your channel. Go find him at Caucasian Sasquatch.
Yeah.
I'm Caucasian Sasquatch. I interview channels. I do this whole Sasquatch shills thing where I'll talk about you so you don't have to. I don't care what politics you do. I don't care what you believe biblically, secular. I don't care what color you wear. None of that matters to me. I'm more interested in documenting the live streamers of YouTube than I am really anything else. And after I do my show, and this is something I've never heard of anyone doing, and I might stop doing it soon, so might want to get in on the ground floor of this one. I do production work for anyone who comes on Sasquatch Shills. If you've got something you're trying to figure out, I'll help you work it out. If I don't know how to do it, I've got 400 other guests that have come in that might know how to do it. One of them can help us. And I have no problem with bothering the hell out of them about it. So much love, everybody. Like, comment, and subscribe, and send me some money because the grift is strong with this one. Much love, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Hi, Sasquatch.
Bye bye.
Schoolboy, I liked your Freudian slip that you had there, Schoolboy. That was fun.
It wasn't Freudian. It was me being frustrated and trying to pre-fire his question.
Everyone eventually falls into some 4th century heresy at some point when talking about the Trinity.
Well, why is Arius wrong? Why is Arius wrong then? How do you know that the church didn't pick the wrong thing and go in the direction where you're following succession of this Nicene Creed when Arius was actually exegeting the Bible, how it was originally proposed by the people that wrote the Bible? How do we just,
so if you want to get into the holistic, yeah, if you want to get into the holistic paradigm, I mean, Christ established a church. He promised the Holy Spirit to guide that church into all truth. The church is the pillar and foundation of truth. The church came together at the first council to settle this issue and came to this conclusion. Now, that's not a dogmatic assertion. There is, like I said, I'll loop it back to the Munchausen's dilemma, and it is a virtuously circular, it is a holistic paradigm that can give rise to an infinite regress of counterfactual explanations within the paradigm. Yeah. And then because of that holistic paradigm, it can make dogmatic assertions where you don't have to go into the nitty-gritty to justify everything. But the justification is there.
So
would you say it can justify anything?
What are you using to determine that Christ's church is the Orthodox Church?
Apostolic
Even if I grant
succession.
you that. Okay, the other churches claim the same thing. The Catholic Church can claim that. Even the Lutheran and Anglican can claim that.
To an extent, they can trace a lineage, but we understand that apostolic succession is also a continuity of the faith handed to the apostles. So then we look at the first millennial church and see if they are consistent with these beliefs. And we can point out to contradictions. I'm cradle Catholic myself, and it took me quite some time looking into church history and theology and finding out about orthodoxy in that journey to find the Orthodox Church. I wasn't always a faithful Catholic.
So you're presupposing that it's impossible that the church can't be going in a direction that wasn't intended by Jesus or Paul or something like that. You're saying it's impossible, no matter
individuals
what.
Individuals within the church can fall into error, but the church herself will never fall into error. That was one of Christ's promises. And this comes down to what is truth, right? And for us as Christians, we understand that truth isn't a what, it's a who.
It also is historically known with Arius, since you brought up Arius, right? The church was already interpreting things in a certain manner, and we can see things like that in the liturgies, even before the actual canon was established itself. That when these people had come to, the church had already been teaching a certain position based off of their succession from the apostles. It is.
I don't see Irenaeus and Hippolytus and Clement, the first century, second century, third and early third century. I don't see a dogmatic position on the triad. I do see what Arius. I see Arius's point of view all over those same people, where Christ is the Son of God, subordinate to the Father, also divine, also the Logos. Arius is not that far off from the Trinity. He just has he's just more subordinate.
So is there a reason then why one of the arguments made against Arius was the fact that he was personally interpreting the scriptures, and that he wasn't using the interpretation of the church?
He's a bishop. He's a bishop.
Yeah, he was personally interpreting the scriptures, not carrying down what was given to him. It wasn't given to him. That's the thing. His interpretation was not given to him. That was the entire.
So the Nicene bishops that determined that the Nicene Creed was correct, why are they right?
They were convinced by Arius.
They're convinced
because Arius made arguments.
Yeah.
Most of his argumentation was based in syllogism. It was not based in actual historical attestation for the position. It was based solely in syllogism and rhetorical thought.
Arius wasn't a bishop? I thought he was a bishop.
He was. I mean, I guess if you want to say it from
he was a monk and a priest.
Yeah, he was a priest.
Oh, okay.
So he was a priest, and he had gone into a journey where he was personally interpreting the scriptures, right? And then that's when he started positing the idea that Christ was created, which is why the Nicene Council had to come to fruition in the first place, as well as the fact that there were also some councils that were prior to that were preaching Arian doctrine that was not actually bringing the entire church together. It was just local synods that were making those claims, right? So that's why the Nicene Council had to come together in the first place. Arianism did not win in the end, which would be part of our paradigm of holding to that position that the Holy Spirit would not let the church actually
didn't win in the end in Greece, but it did win all over Europe in the Gothic churches, and I would say even inspires Catholic Church in some ways with the Filioque.
I will concede in a sense on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I do think, and it's just my I know you guys are gonna just reject this. I'm not a Christian. I don't have any.
I'm not just going to simply reject it. I mean, I'll give you a historical account. So when we're talking.
Well, I was going to say, I do think people like Irenaeus and earlier church fathers before the third or late third, early fourth, seem to be, in my personal studies, more aligned with Arius's point of view that Christ is subordinate.
Without nuance that to like monarchical Trinitarianism, it is possible for someone to kind of smuggle in their own ideas of subordinationism. Bryce's patron saint is Saint Justin Martyr, Saint Justin the philosopher, and we hear this claim from Muslims a lot of the time that he was a subordinationist. But then
I think Origen was too, but he's not a saint, so it doesn't matter.
Right. But Saint Justin Martyr wasn't a subordinationist, even though some of his writings can look that way if you take them out of context.
They definitely look that way.
But when you look at things in a holistic, but if you look at them in a holistic paradigm, you can see that this is actually not what he was teaching at all.
There's a lot of
he talks about worshiping the Father, Son, and Holy.
You don't think that there was a progression of ideas into the 4th century, and that they didn't really know for sure, like maybe it was revealed over time or something like that?
There would be a progression in terms of like describing things, but the concept itself, we believe, always existed. I mean, like if you wanted to talk about Saint Justin Martyr, he's actually my patron saint, so he's actually the one that I've studied the most, like
He's
on
pretty
that
cool.
specific subject.
I like Justin Martyr. I like reading Justin Martyr.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I don't know if you wanted to get into that, but I mean, I have like all of my notes for Saint Justin Martyr in case you wanted to get into that. But he was a full-fledged Trinitarian.
It's relative to this because I'm trying to figure out how you determine Orthodox, the Christianity, the Triune God.
I mean, Neil, think about
this does matter.
Man. Like, I mean, but like, if you want to make this argument that there was like a subordinationism, you can go to the Gospels, which are obviously where Saint Justin Martyr would have been exegeting from, and you can see doubting Thomas, Saint Thomas, the apostle, says, "My Lord and my God." He recognizes Christ as God.
You can
so
still
it's
have,
just like there wasn't this view.
Yeah, but you could still have a logos divine being subordinate to the Father of his the nous, the mind of his divine being, one material, one immaterial. That's kind of like Philo's theology, the 1st century Jewish Philo. That's kind of what he believed.
Let me ask it like this before I give you like the specific quotation. Would you say that in order to be God, you must be one nature? If it's a monotheism presuppose, of course.
I guess
to be the one true God that is worshipped.
Yeah, if we're presupposing monotheism in a strict sense, then yes.
Okay, yeah, because historically, right now, you'd be like, for the sake of the argument, you'd be arguing from an Arian perspective. So you still believe in like a one true God, right? So with that being said, right, I want to read this, and I want you to tell me what you think about what is being said here. So specifically with Saint Justin Martyr, he says this in his first apology in chapter 6. He says, hence we are called atheists by the Greeks, and we confess that we are atheists so far as gods of this sort are concerned, but not with respect of the most true God, the Father of all righteousness, temperance, and the other virtues, who is free from all impurity, but both him and the Son, who came forth from him and taught us these things, and the host of the other good angels who follow and made like him, and the prophetic spirit we worship and adore, knowing them in reason and truth. Right. So would you say here that Saint Justin Martyr is telling us to worship the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit here?
Yeah, I see the 3 elements are there in what Justin Martyr. I agree. Even in John's
you
gospel,
wouldn't be able to worship somebody subordinate, though.
Well, I agree that even in John's gospel, the elements of the Trinity are there, but I still think there's room for a Son of God figure to be given the Holy Spirit at baptism through John's lens, and being begotten at the baptism.
That's adoptionism.
Yeah,
that contradicts even
for that.
Like
There's
John.
no room for that. I'm saying,
But no, there isn't, especially in the Gospel of John, because you have John 1:1-3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
It doesn't say Jesus is the Logos.
John 1:14.
The Logos.
Right.
Yeah.
The Logos.
The Logos became flesh. The Word became flesh.
I get that. The Word became flesh. It wasn't always flesh, right? But some of these early Christian heretics, some of these Valentinian Gnostics thought that at that time he became begotten by God, but though he became the Logos, which was eternal. They believed the Logos was eternal, but Christ becoming baptized
was that the fourth Ogdode or the sixth Ogdode, Bryce?
Oh yeah, so you know Valentinus pretty well.
Yeah. I've read a decent amount of those works, as well as like.
No, I know. To you guys, it's heresy, but I'm just pointing out that some people exegeted John this way. So I'm just, I know you don't agree with
Well,
that.
I mean, like regarding like the argument regarding with John, right? When it says that in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, and then we get to John 1:14, where it says the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us. It's already saying that the Logos existed prior, and that the Logos entered creation, right? And so, if the Logos entered creation as flesh, that would have to be the Logos that is God and was with God. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So then that's Jesus.
No, I get how you're interpreting that, but you don't think there's any room
How
for
are you? How would you?
I mean, there's some like I said, there's different. He could still be subordinate to the Father, even if the Logos is eternal. The Logos can be a divine reason of.
Are you familiar with monarchical Trinitarianism?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. What about?
Okay, so like we wouldn't say that he's subordinate because there is one will, one mind in the Holy Trinity. Everything that God does is done in a triadic nature from the Father through the Son and in the Holy Spirit. That doesn't mean that the Son is subordinate in his divine nature. In the incarnation, when he says the Father is greater than I, we can understand this, that he receives all things from the Father,
right?
That he is fully human, he is fully God simultaneously, but he is doing things in a theandric manner. There are two wills in the incarnate Logos. There are two minds in the incarnate Logos.
Okay, I agree with that.
And since we're on that topic of specifically John 1 regarding like the Word was with God, since you mentioned Saint Irenaeus, let me actually show you what he said about John 1:1. He says in Against Heresies, Book 4, Chapter 6, Section 6, he says, "Wherefore also John does appropriately relate the Word of God as being present with his own handiwork, he who is with God in the beginning with God, declaring to us that there is one God, the Almighty, who made all things by his word, by whom he made the heavens and the earth, thus revealing to us that the Father through the Son, who is in the Father, and the Father is in the Son, for the Son is the self-existing Word of the Father, and thus the Father and the Son are one. And the Father is the invisible of the Son, but the Son is the visible of the Father. And on this account all is true, for the Spirit is truth. Therefore the Father, the Son, and the Spirit together are the living God."
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that that's... I think that Arius would have probably thrown up if he heard that.
It depends on, because Arius was basically charged. I guess Arius disagreed with the level of equality.
He said that Christ was a created
He's still
being.
divine. Yeah, but he's still divine.
Yeah, but he believed in homo.
A lesser divinity, though, not
which is not
consubstantial.
the same nature. Yeah, he wouldn't be consubstantial because that's homoousios. But he believed in homoiousios, which is something that was condemned at Nicaea and Constantinople I. So he literally believed that he was a lesser nature than the Father. So then he can't be one with the Father.
Well,
why can't it be in terms of will be one with the Father?
Because it says that he's the one God, the Father and the Son together, and the Spirit are the one living God, right? So if that's the one living God, the one living God would not be multiple natures. That would be absurd.
But isn't Irenaeus using the word Logos and Sophia as the Spirit and the Son, not using the word Jesus Christ as he's not saying Jesus was there in the beginning. He's saying the Logos was there in the beginning.
Well, I mean, he also believes that John 1:14 is referring to the Logos as Jesus. Right? That's what he believes. That's what he's referring to John 1:14 with.
Sure. Okay. I'm not really gonna die on that hill.
But why does it have to be a physical nature that it could be referring to? Why can't it be in terms of the spiritual nature?
What do you mean by that? What does that mean? What is the
in
difference
terms
between
of
physical and spiritual nature?
Like, because the Father's spirit, because it says in the Bible, the Father's spirit, he's not physical. He's not.
I agree. Yeah.
And everything. So
he is not physical, correct?
In terms of how they spiritually walk and the characteristics of the Father and everything, in terms of that, they're one nature.
Okay, so
he has the nature of the Father, in terms of how he walks and his character.
Well, I mean, we do believe that Jesus has two natures, if that's what you're asking. We believe
the physical and the spiritual.
That does solve it. No, that does solve it.
He has the divine. He has the divine nature and the human nature and diophysitism, right?
I get what you're saying. I get where you're going. I see where you see the succession from going back to the early church fathers into the 4th century. That I'm fine with.
Neil, can I recommend one church father I think you should really read?
Yeah.
Saint Dionysius the Areopagite. Read on divine.
I've been reading him a lot lately because of his. I did a whole video on him recently, actually, with a scholar who does Neoplatonism, and was talking about him. Oh, yeah, he's very fascinating.
Have you read on the divine names?
But I don't. You guys think he's actually a real person that wrote in the first century?
Yes.
I don't. He's a really.
Yeah, we actually hold to the claim that.
So he was a Neoplatonist before the Neoplatonist.
Yes. We believe that Plotinus is actually, yes, we believe that
do you know who he was though? He was
inspired by.
He was a friend of Paul, according to the tradition. He's a friend of Paul, right? Yeah.
But he was one of the top lawyers in Areopagus.
Yeah, I was actually there in Athens not too long ago. The Areopagus is where Paul was tried. That's where Paul was tried.
Yeah, and he was an extremely learned man for his time.
It's also where Socrates was held in prison too, by the way. Same spot.
Yeah, so like we don't have an issue with saying that, like, for example, he may have been using like Platonic language, but in terms of like Neoplatonic language, we believe that Plotinus was inspired by Plato and Dionysius, and that's what Neoplatonism came from.
That would explain the order of things, but I still think the scholars, I still would appeal to the scholars on that. But I'm open to hear where you guys.
I mean, I was about to say, like, the arguments that like, we have for that would be based on scholars as well. I swear on my life, I did not just make that up right here.
No, I've heard people argue that he was a real person that really wrote in the first century. I've heard that.
Dr. Craig Trulia has a great paper on his corpus actually being from Saint Dionysius the Areopagite and refuting this idea of pseudo Dionysius.
I think the problem you guys have though is no one citing him until like the late 4th century. No one even ever mentioning him. He'd be this major church father, and no one. Papias doesn't talk about him. Irenaeus doesn't talk about him. Ignatius doesn't talk about him. Clement, Origen, all those guys don't talk about him, and I think that's where the problem lies with. And then on top of that, his very Neoplatonist ideas make you think this guy was writing way later. That's my
yeah. Like obviously, like if he did come after Plotinus, then yes, that would make sense. In the sense of where it would seem like he then has to come obviously later on in time. But the reason why that we would say that it's Plotinus is sorry, I lost my train of thought here. That Plotinus was inspired. Yeah, that Plotinus was inspired by obviously Plato and Saint Dionysius. That in terms of like the church fathers, right? Like we don't have an issue with even admitting that the vast majority of the church fathers probably did not understand the vast majority of the things that Saint Dionysius was saying, and they were not using him for argumentation, right? Because of the fact that you have to admit, obviously, since you said you've been reading him, that his writings are much more complicated than a lot of the other people of that time period. Very hard to understand.
Hard to understand. I have to ask people what he means by certain shit or something, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. But like that is back to the whole thing, right? The big thing that we're talking about. That is the main reason though, like why we would say that the church has been able to keep this for this whole time. I know that obviously there are certain church fathers from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, for example, prior to Nicaea, that use different language to describe certain things. Like for example, Tertullian, right? Like when he referred to the sun, he did not use the word son in the sense of like a hypostasis. He used the son in terms of a title given upon being put on earth. So then when it says the son is created, he's not literally saying that the son in terms of being the logos is created. He's saying that the son is a title that was given to the word, right? Which obviously is not the wording we would use anymore, because one of the main points of the ecumenical councils was to formalize the way in which we say something. Because, like, I mean, you can actually see this in Nicaea when it says that you cannot say that the son is of another ousia or hypostasis of the Father. He's not saying that God has to be one person. He's saying at that time the people were declaring two different types of schools of thought. Like the Alexandrian school, for example, would say that hypostasis meant nature. So then when they say ousia or hypostasis, they're reaching out to all of the schools, because different people had different ways in which they would say certain doctrines. So that's why like they use that type of wording. So because they're trying to formalize and bring everybody into one understanding within words, because it was confusing people, which is the entire point of Ephesus and Chalcedon.
Yeah. Yep. It makes sense why those councils took place. You know, you got people castrating themselves and doing all types of shit, and then people need order. No, that was one of the things that the Nicene Creed established was no more castration. But like, so what I guess if I'm trying to understand you guys, you're convinced by the succession of the bishops going back, like
one aspect of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Why? And you're convinced by the success of Christianity against, the odds of a pagan world. Christianity survives. That's one of the. Is it fair to say that's one of the reasons why you guys are convinced by it?
And that's one of the reasons actually why, like, the first
obviously it succeeded, and we're here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things. It's not going to only just be that, but that's a big reason, right? Like earlier we were talking about, we have a holistic perspective of the worldview, so it's everything. It's not just that. It's not just one specific thing. That makes sense.
Another thing, like, because we were talking about like the pagans, for example, like when we're talking about, like, for example, the other like pagan religions that existed at the time, that's actually the main reason why, like, the first, second, third century Christians, some of their main polemics was against like the pagans, as well as some of the monotheistic pagan type sects, like Platonism, of course, like Saint Dionysius, for example. And I think it's on unity and being, and on distinctions. He's refuting Plato, but not Plotinus, right? So, like, he's refuting the specific doctrine that the Greeks were pushing at that time.
The old academy stuff.
Yeah, the old academy stuff. And Saint Justin Martyr, for example, this is considered a spurious work. It's still debated among scholars, but of course, his exposition to the Greeks, right? Like, he's specifically, because he was a Saint Justin Martyr.
Oh yeah, he wrote the same title. Yeah, that's right. They both have the same
exposition to the Greeks. When the entire refutation there was against the Platonists and the people that were holding pure Aristotelianism, right? So, like, those people existed.
These guys are a bunch of nerds.
Yeah, pretty much.
Martyr was saying they're a bunch of nerds. They think about
worship ideas.
And math.
They worship ideas. They don't worship like, they think that truth is in the idea. It's not a who. The truth is a who, right? Like, that's kind of the whole point that he was making with that.
Yeah, I would say Justin Martyr was a huge deal in convincing a lot of the Greeks to switch from Platonism to Christianity.
But Raging Tomato, I'm assuming you probably wanted to get back to like the original point, or because
I was enjoying this. I love information, so this, like, if this is the way you guys are going, I'm okay.
I mean, I don't think it's irrelevant because I'm trying to.
I'm just making sure. I don't want to like pivot into like
trying to understand what,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm trying to understand what is convincing about Christianity versus other ideas, and this is kind of answering that, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
That's good.
Sarah loves any topic that'll make me shut up.
So
we do too, Corinne.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it. You're welcome to go backwards if you want and get back onto
entirely up to Gnostic. It's his thing, you know.
Yeah, I'm really just enjoying listening to this. Like, this is a lot of stuff that I hadn't heard before, so I'm captivated.
I mean, I'm down to go for another half hour or so. I mean, I would like to hear maybe some more direct arguments for why the triune.
So I want to address something that you said in the intro, actually, directly. So you were saying, why couldn't it be like the Greek pantheon, or even like the Greeks that held to this one supreme deity, right?
Yeah, like the Middle Platonist worldview.
Yeah, well, like even within that, they still have this mythology of the natural world, right? And it's like these warring gods, et cetera, right?
It depends on which, because a lot of Middle Platonists kind of regarded mythology as more of like morality stories, and they kind of had more theoretical, like a lot, even going back to the pre-Socratics, they didn't even call God any names. They're like doing their own thing, and they actually didn't like Homer and Hesiod and some of the playwriters. They were Plato is in Plato's Republic, book 3 and 2 and 3. He's like, we got to get Plato, stop teaching kids Plato and Hesiod. They're not good. We need to replace it with something better. So I would say even in Platonist thought, they're not grounded in the myths. They're more grounded in philosophical, theoretical stuff.
I think Middle Platonism might be one of the best routes.
That's where the problem comes in, and that's where Christianity has that epistemological privilege. It's a privileged position because of the revelatory nature of God to humanity.
I think
so. We can ground these.
Another way to think about that is Middle Platonism, I think, is one of the best routes you can go, because they have the eternal forms as these, like the...
They have the logos too.
They have the logos, but they have the divine nous. Right, yeah. Right. So they also have like reality structured in a graded order. So you have like the one, the intellect, the soul, and the world. But my argument earlier was with the problem of the one and the many, it falls short because the one in Middle Platonism is beyond intellect. It's unknowable. It's impersonal. It's undifferentiated.
There's no bridge,
right? So there's no bridge between the multiplicity and the unity. That's my point.
I mean, they would argue that the daimons
it's
are
the classic.
the
It's the
intermediary.
classic. Yeah, it's the classic critique of Platonism. Like, okay, how do you have access to the forms?
Well, plus the noose in
Through the
Middle
muse. Yeah, the muse would inspire you to get the information.
Well, another
Revelation,
issue,
revelatory in a way.
But there's still a perfection in that realm that is completely unattainable and incomprehensible by us.
We also believe in this thing as well called logos spermaticos, which means seeds of the word, right? So like we actually have icons in Orthodoxy that proclaim
I'll pull it up.
when
I've got it.
actually Schoolboy has it on his wall. It's actually called the pre-Christian philosophers icon, which is basically when Christ went down into Hades to harrow over it. Some of the very first people to ever accept Christ were people like Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates.
I've seen
all
these
of
before.
those guys, right? And that they were with him, and that they reveled in that, right? Because like Plato, like in the Republic, for example, like he actually said himself, he says if a perfectly moral man ever entered this world, that he would be humiliated and crucified. Right. So like we believe that like Plato, in a sense, was also still coming to this through philosophy, not in a perfect sense, of course, but he was able to still understand that in a way. Right. So like when we're talking about like the Platonic forms, for example, that mirrors a lot of the doctrine that we have regarding things like the essence energies distinction and the logi doctrine regarding the reflections of the divine mind and the divine ideas and things like that, where we're able to apprehend God cataphatically through that. But not like in a entirely apophatic or not entirely cataphatic sense, of course, according to his essence. But like that's, a bunch of other theology stuff that goes a little bit too deep for like the point of this conversation. But yeah,
Vladimir Lossky makes a beautiful, like, kind of just like taking a step back and looking at the history at that time in the world, in the way that you had these different spiritual schools of thought, right? You had the Greeks who were making this mental ascent, right, through the intellect, through philosophy. And if you think about it, in a sense, as like two faces of the same mountain, right? And you have the Greeks that are making this mental ascent through their intellect and through their philosophy. You have the Jews that have the prophets, they have the law. And then they culminated in the person of Jesus Christ, who when they had, the Greeks went as far as they could. Like, that's why, like, I think that all philosophies, like
Eusebius makes his argument in a preparation for the gospel too.
100%. And it is this beautiful, beautiful display of God's providence and his wisdom and his knowledge to have the incarnation happen at this perfect time where humanity was essentially primed for the gospel, for the God-man, for the second person of the Trinity to come down, reveal the fullness.
Yeah, if Christianity was true, that makes it. If Christianity was true, that would make a lot of sense.
Gnostic, if you don't mind,
I find that absolutely beautiful, and I know that's not maybe the argument that you're looking for, but just I think that speaks to us in a way that does speak some truth to our heart. Maybe it's not this intellectual, like just mental assent, but even in Orthodoxy, we have this doctrine of the nous, of the heart, of the spirit, where not everything is mere rationality. That there is a type of knowledge that we can, and you're probably familiar with this, that in Greek they had gnosis and they had episteme.
Yeah.
Two different types of knowledge.
Two different types of knowledge, yeah.
So, yep. So there are these different faculties, and that the nous is the eye of the soul, the highest faculty of our soul. And that is, yeah, like how in Orthodoxy, through prayer, through hesychasm, which is that inner stillness, would see God, would participate in the divine energies.
Gnostic, if you don't mind, man, may I ask you just a little quick side note? Have you ever visited an Orthodox church before or no?
Yeah, I was at Pascha this year in Greece.
Oh, that's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I went I did the
man,
whole.
I ain't even got
I was
to do
there.
that.
I was there 3 days, 3 different liturgies that week.
Oh, that's beautiful. Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah,
Which did you go to?
I posted on X. I said, in Greece, religion is alive. Like in America, it's dead. if religion was like here in Greece as America, I think there'd be way more Christians and way more people believing in God. The way religion's done in Greece was like mind blowing.
Which 3 services of Holy Week did you go to?
The day before Pascha, where they throw all the stuff on the ground, and a liturgy right before that. So I was there, and I did the whole 3-4 hours. I was there till like 3 a.m, and everybody was just rocking out like they were all in a religious frenzy. It was crazy. I filmed it and everything.
It's a feast. That is the peak of our liturgical calendar. That is what we look forward to.
No, I get
every year.
Trust me, I get it. I get it.
Wait,
I have nothing bad to say. Nothing bad to say about it.
I also think like older, like, countries, like America is still a baby, right? And our foundation is very confusing, in terms of how we operate through society. But other countries, like they are built
steep in
with
tradition.
Yeah, and if you're like, there is no other anything.
The church that I attended was
my godfather's godfather, actually.
Really?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I just asked about the church I attended was a 10th century church, Byzantine church that was still up and running. It was old icons all over the place. It was pretty.
And you said that this was in Greece?
In Athens, yeah.
Dude, I'm like jealous.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was
So I'm
awesome.
saying, man, I was like, I ain't even got to do that yet.
The whole city was up until 3 a.m. Everyone was in a religious frenzy, and
we
they're all
have
running through the
Gnostics
streets with torches. And oh, look at this, by the way. I have it right here somewhere. I think I still have. Oh, look, here's the wax from the candle from
Wow.
Athens. The priest gave me this. He gave me
Back to what you were saying, Sarah. My godfather's godfather. I was having a conversation with him a couple months ago, and he put it really beautifully. He's from Greece, lives here now with his family, and he was talking about this kind of dichotomy between like the older European nations versus America. And the way that he put it is that in America, we are living in history, whereas when you're in these older countries, you are surrounded by it.
Yeah.
So there was like this transfer, and it actually like kind of imprints in a way on you while you're there, because you realize how old and just what came before you. Where in America, everything is so novel. Everything's new.
Yeah.
We're constantly looking for innovation. We're looking for the next big thing, and it's just a different gear.
I mean, it's beautiful to think, though. I mean, now if you look at, I think even back in 2016 here in America, the population of, for example, Orthodox Christians, I think was only like 900,000, and then now fast forward today, I think it's like 10 million plus. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Really?
Right?
Those numbers. Yeah, those numbers are way inflated. Both.
Well, I mean, still, I mean, a big jump. I mean, one of the things is that
Stop pushing that Orthodox down.
Well, I have to, bro. I have to push it, man. But no, I think I mean, but still, there is definitely an increase, though, specifically just around inner cities. Like, I'll give you an example. In Miami, we had a huge increase in like 4 local churches, and one of the, I mean, Miami is one of those cities that it's like a cesspit, right? So there's a lot of young people are coming to Orthodoxy. It's actually it's growing fast. I mean, it really, really is. So, there is still hope, even though it seems lost, right? I mean, but there are a lot of young people.
There's a lot of people. I mean, the internet's done a wonderful thing where it really opens up the knowledge of the last 2,000 years to an extent, where it's opening us up, where we can see the history of it. People are looking for more tradition. They're asking themselves, okay, what did the earliest Christians believe? Especially in America, where we have non-denominational mega churches where they're having pastors fly in on cables suspended during Christmas pageants, and it's just like.
And 100 years ago, they wouldn't have access to know about the Orthodox Church. They would only know about the Catholic Church and whatever. They would have no idea about like some of this stuff unless they were like a scholar at a university in a library. But now everyone can just go online and look this stuff up.
Well, I think also more people are trying to investigate and interact with the old versus chiming into the new, per se. Like
modernity.
For instance, I think a lot of millennials, we kind of ditched the traditional stuff and we just started doing our own thing, right? Because we this person brought me trauma, and I hated religion because my parents made me go, and all of these different things. But I think the next grouping is going to start adhering to traditions because they want that. That's what I'm seeing out of the younger.
Well, there's also
What?
there's also a lot of
Hey,
weirdness
and
in like
just
just the post.
and just to correct really quick, sorry, really quick, bro. Just to correct Bryce and Schoolboy, I have to correct you guys as a catechumen. There's actually Britannica actually put out a stat. There's actually 6.5 million Orthodox Christians here in America. It's not inflated.
Hey, what's your epistemic justification for that, bro?
It's gonna be Britannica.org. It's gonna be.
Hope you originally said 10, so you're wrong too.
I'm wrong too. But I like
half.
I like to round up, you know. To the
A
nearest.
big roundup.
But
That's
no,
a big roundup.
And Sarah, I think a lot of that has to do with like all this like postmodernism and like especially like a lot of this very leftist geared type of philosophy about like identity and just this weird like it's so far from what we see just evidenced in nature. Like we know it's not true. At our core, we know it's not true, and you're literally just drinking the Kool-Aid to think a lot of these very strange modern ideologies.
People
even
want
if you look
some
into
sort
the
of
roots,
people want some
Go
sort of
ahead.
rigid structure in their lives. People are looking for that.
Yes,
Definitely.
just the same as
well, they want
children.
truth. They want truth.
Well, even more so, I think they're tired of the hocus pocus of let's just start making shit up, right? And they're like, wait a minute, and you're right, like it comes down to the truth concept, and so they like backdoor it through, looking at the different things online or what can, now they have the internet at their fingertips, so they can do this sort of a search and find type of scenario. But I think it is bringing them back to religion. I think they're asking all of the right questions and saying, well, what is this? Is God real? Or, why does this crazy stuff not make sense? All of these different things. And Kelly says with the Big Ten, Paul met the Greeks at their own level and introduced Christ as the unknown God, which they debated the nature of. Does anybody have a thought to add to that?
That goes back to
No,
the logos grammaticos thing we're talking about, right? Like we
Mhm.
believe that like natural theology can only get you so far, right? And like Platonism would be considered natural theology because the entire argument for God is entirely rooted in syllogism and philosophy rather than anything regarding revelation. Yeah, the observation of the world. They came to the conclusion in a natural sense that you can come to the conclusion of monotheism in a philosophical stance. But obviously, if you do not have the revelation that was given to us by God, then we don't have the ability to actually understand it in its fullness, and we don't have the ability to actually put a name to that one that the Platonists talk about.
Yeah, the agnostos theon, unknowable God, or the hen, And Paul is basically going to Athens and going, "You guys are so close. Here is it." It seems like what his plan was,
And Scumbag comes in with the big five and
it
says,
wasn't necessarily his plan.
Abe is the only one taking no L's tonight. And I think Abe has been fairly quiet this evening. Abe, did you want to give any final thoughts or anything like that before you go? Plug yourself.
I was just going to say thanks, gents. I came up to say a few things, but the truth is you guys just took this and controlled it. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to listen as well. So, yeah, thank you for all the good talks. My house has been extremely loud, dogs barking and stuff in the background, so I had to keep muting in a panic. So I'm just going to dip out. Thank you for the fun. Have a good
Tell
night.
everyone where they can find you, Abe.
My name says it all. Just look for Abe Dinkus. So thanks, guys. Have a good night.
You too, Abe.
Did you have anything like other regarding like just the topic or whatever, Gnostic? Because I know that we kind of talked about like just some wholesome stuff there just now, but I didn't want to.
No, I was basically going to go into the same train.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess I understand more like why you guys decided on this God rather than any other God. If you're I don't know if we can keep rehashing like why the tag argument only works for the Christian God versus any other God. I guess we can, we went through it already,
It'd be like based out like I said, the explanatory power thing within it being coherent, right? So like being able to have an explanatory power and a justification for each of those problems that exist in, like, for example, epistemology, like the one in the many, for example, or just the general problem of universals in the first place. Like these types of things are capable of being answered within the philosophy and the historical attestation of the church, and that's the reason why that like we believe that that would be considered the coherent paradigm. That's why like the transcendental argument runs in the methodology of like a coherentist type of argument. We don't follow coherentism, but we do subscribe to some of the argumentations. Like, for example, in coherentism, you can accept a certain level of circularity, like virtuous circularity, which is parts of the paradigm referring to other parts of the paradigm, rather than vicious circularity, where vicious circularity is saying like, well, the Bible is true because Jesus said this, right? But then that's in the Bible. So like,
yeah.
Like, so then it repeats itself in that one claim. So like the church has a different way of that. There's three main ones, right? It would be like the church that's attested from it, and then the Bible itself that comes from that and from the attestation from the apostles, and then as well as the philosophy that was preached by all of these people over time to make that entire paradigm.
I would even add a fourth to that too, Bryce. It's that lived participation in the transformation that comes through that participatory practice.
And anecdotes. You know, it may not be like actual objective evidence.
But people say like,
it does show something, right?
Yeah, one of the first things that like, can you show like a repeatable, like an experiment? And my first reaction was like the saints. Like
how
literally we are still producing saints to this day. Where is your Saint Paisios, right? Like
that's the common thing that Orthodox people will say to like anybody, like, where is your Saint Paisios, right? Like that's like the whole
a modern.
Okay, but let me ask you this: how do the problem of the one and the many and the problem of universals? Where does that get answered by Christian doctrine? Like, where can you point to that actually just deals with that without
the problem of the one and the many is something that is it's not explicitly addressed, but it's implicitly addressed by St. John of Damascus in the Fount of Knowledge. For the Fount of Knowledge is like his main entire philosophical work, where he basically brings upon all of the everything pretty much that Christians have taught prior to that, forming it into a singular philosophical book that explains pretty much everything regarding the Christian paradigm. And he also addresses many different heresies within the Fount of Knowledge. There's something called Against All Heresies, where he actually addresses pretty much every single worldview and every system that exists prior to like the argumentation that Christians were making. So like it addresses all the pagans, it addresses even the Muslims. He was one of the first Christians to ever address Islam and the problems with Islam, and as well as like even atheism, right? Like all of these different things, like he addressed in Against All Heresies. And at the very beginning of the Fount of Knowledge, actually, he makes what we would consider actually a proto-transcendental argument, where he says that like knowledge can only be acquired via God and his revelation, right? Like, so like that is, it's a very simplistic statement, of course, but it's basically, he says, this is the reason why we hold to what we hold. Now I'm going to obliterate every single worldview and show you why. Like, that's like the whole point of the Fount of Knowledge. That's the entire book's purpose.
I mean, if you don't mind, I'll read the couple paragraphs that he's talking about. It's literally the first chapter for like the intro to the philosophical chapters, which is
what was his name? What was his name again?
St. John of Damascus.
St. John of Damascus.
Okay, thank you.
So he writes, nothing is more estimable than knowledge, for knowledge is the light of the rational soul. The opposite, which is ignorance, is darkness. Just as the absence of light is darkness, so is the absence of knowledge a darkness of the reason. Now, ignorance is proper to irrational beings, while knowledge is proper to those who are rational. Consequently, one who by nature has the faculty of knowing and understanding, yet does not have knowledge, such a one, although by nature rational, is not by neglect and indifference inferior to rational beings. By knowledge, I mean the true knowledge of things which are, because things which have being are the object of knowledge. False knowledge, insofar as it is a knowledge of that which is not, is ignorance rather than knowledge. For falsehood is nothing else but that which is not. Now, since we do not live with our soul stripped bare, but on the contrary have it clothed over, as it were, with the veil of the flesh, our soul has the mind as a sort of eye, which sees and has the faculty of knowing, and which is capable of receiving knowledge and having understanding of things which are. It does not, however, have knowledge and understanding of itself, but has need of one to teach it. So let us approach that teacher in whom there is no falsehood and who is the truth. Christ is the subsistent wisdom and truth, and in him are all the hidden treasures of knowledge.
I mean, it sounds great, and I don't even necessarily disagree with what he says about like knowledge versus false knowledge and ignorance, but and at the end, it just sounds like an assertion. Christ is the, what was that last part he said? I don't want to get it wrong.
The subsistent
the
wisdom.
Subsistent in knowledge. So he is
Yeah.
Sophia. He is the Logos.
Yeah.
So if you
He's
don't
just
have him,
like
you don't have knowledge, right?
Right, like in the Orthodox Bible, that's not in the Protestant Bibles. You have this the wisdom of Solomon, and where it's Sophia is this creative force, or be in the beginning, and he's saying that Christ is Sophia. Fine, I get that, but where it's kind of just an assertion, though, isn't it? Isn't it kind of just saying what you?
Well, it wouldn't just be like a
because the incarnation is revelatory. Like, this is where it breaks that down from being just a mythos, that there is this historical person of Jesus Christ, and then that faith that comes from, well, was he really crucified and resurrected? Well, that's the free will that you have to choose.
Right, it comes down to that, actually. Yeah. Now
it really does. And then everything
Yeah.
else builds off of the resurrection.
And the thing I wanted to address what you said, Gnostic, as well, is that, like, in terms of like Munchausen's trilemma, when we're talking about something like a dogmatic assertion, right? Like, it wouldn't be considered like a dogmatic assertion, like with what you said. The reason why is because everything that he is proclaiming, because he's from the 7th century, right? So everybody that comes before him was proclaiming these things, and that's the reason why that he was why he was making these claims in the first place, because he's like, look, this is the reason why the things that they are. And then throughout the Fount of Knowledge, he also quotes, like, obviously many different people from the past, proving these points and showing how, like, things have always been this way in this time period. And, you know, like, kind of like the Council of Nicaea. When the Council of Nicaea proclaims something like Christ is consubstantial with the Father, they use the church fathers to say to make that claim, right? Like, they used the people that came prior to Nicaea to state that. They didn't just like like, you know, Saint Nicholas didn't just like come up to the plate, and then when Arius said there was a time when the sun was not, Saint Nicholas did not slap him because of the fact that you know, like, because Saint Nicholas just disagreed. It was because he was like, you're blaspheming everyone who came before you by saying that. Like, that's like the whole point.
What's funny about that, though, is Arius wrote a letter to Saint Athanasius and said that the Nicene Trinitarians were following the heresy of Valentinus. He names Valentinus, who had a triad, and then Sibelius, who had like a God and the Son and Father are one being heresy.
So hilariously enough, actually, the thing regarding Valentinus is funny because that's actually evidence that we use towards showing that there were people that held Mary to a very high regard. Because, as you know, Valentinus's Trinity was mother, son, father, mother, and son, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, when he wrote that to Athanasius, I mean, obviously, just by even knowing what Valentinus taught, you know that that's a straw man of the Trinity, right? Like,
I think that's fair, because it's not the same Trinity at all. I think that's a fair. Yeah, I get that.
Especially because the mother, right, like, would be considered like a self-subsistent thing that's not from the father directly, and all these types of things, and like how it's kind of like a dualism that causes the son in that dualism, which, like, it's not even close to the same thing in that sense.
That's fair. That's fair. He's charging them with Valentinianism, but they're not necessarily Valentinians.
Yeah.
And to address just the question you had about the one and the many, I mean, the Trinity answers the one and the many, right? When we look at humanity, we see one humanity, right? But then we see many different persons. And this is grounded through.
Why 3, though?
What was that?
Why not like 5 or 8 or something? You know,
because
like
3 is. I mean, I couldn't answer like why 3 like explicitly. I can tell you why it's not 1 or why it's not 2. Right? Because you need a community. Because you need a community for love. Right? Like, if it's only 1, then it's just a narcissism.
Yeah.
If it's 2, it's this forced, like, compulsory
a natural emanation without intent.
Yeah.
Dualism always eventually leads into some form of non-intentional non-intentional system where there has to be a natural one side and a natural other side. 3 is actually considered like the perfect relation, right? As in the ancient world, especially even like prior to like the Trinity being formalized, that was something that was obviously posited, as you can see in like other pagan religions.
Right.
That people
That's
have
what I
seen
would
in the
answer
past,
that
right?
question. That's how
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
answer that. Yeah.
And so yeah, but like obviously we don't believe that they got it from those
From the
people,
pagans.
right? Like yeah. So like being able to see that a perfection of a relation exists in 3 in terms of like simplicity in God, of course, and simplicity in anything that would be considered divinely perfect. That's the reason why we would assert that. I mean, we wouldn't say that there would ever be a
It
fourth or
also,
fifth
If I
hypostasis in
can
the
speak from
Trinity.
personal opinion
But
real quick, actually, like, and this is
yeah.
something that I just kind of like just pondering it, and I don't take this as dogmatic, but I would say that like 3 is the bare minimum for this community of love, right? But with human beings being made in the image and likeness of God and being welcomed to participate in the divine life is to be welcomed into that, and not to become God by nature, but through participation. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with theosis and how
Yeah.
that is truly like the call of the Orthodox Christian life is to God became man so man could become God. And that means by adoption, by participation. Like the iron is not by nature hot and glowing. When it's introduced to fire, though, it takes on those properties of the fire, and it takes on this hot and glowing nature. And that is what we are called to be in that
yeah,
analogy.
the
We would be the
Pythagoreans had
iron
a
and by
the Pythagoreans had a doctrine similar to theosis. I think they had a different name for it. I think it's just apotheosis, but there even going back as far as the old,
but that's also a very different mode, and that goes back to what we were talking about with Gnosis versus episteme, right?
episteme.
Like like you have this, like one is in ascent through just material knowledge, like this knowledge of the world, the secret knowledge. The Gnostic sects, they all had this secret knowledge. For Christianity, it is truly, we are welcoming everyone with open arms, and we are saying that no, it is through God's grace, it is through participation in the sacraments, through this prayer life, through self-denial, these kenosis, this self-emptying of our passions and our sinful will, to avail ourselves to the will of God, to become like God through adoption, become a son, son and daughter.
There's also this idea in Middle Platonism of corporal, incorporeal, and spiritual, of 3, like the nature of God being of 3. And I think there's people who argue that Philo was a Trinitarian, even just as a Jew, not even as a Christian, that he believed that God had a nature of 3. And even going back to the old academy, Plato had similar ideas, very archaic versions of this. Yeah.
And we even talk about how like ancient Israel, like prior to the incarnation, that it wasn't like this monolithic Unitarian view, that there like there's even like there's a book out there, Two Powers of Heaven. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
And we'll go for about 10 more minutes. Should finish us out, Gnostic,
Yeah,
I think.
that's fine. Yeah.
In with the big 5, I might not be a smart man, but you're not going to get me to look up Dinkus. I remember what happened to my ad suggestions last time. Fool me once. Sorry. And Vesper, in with the big 5, it was revealed to me that naturalism is the necessary precondition for knowledge. Now what?
Substantiate it.
I was about to say, like, it would be regarding the explanatory power of such, right? So then we would then do a reductio ad absurdum to see if that would be the case. If you're capable of gathering or if you're able to have the precondition of knowledge in naturalism, then that would be an argument to be made, right? So like that's the entire point of the transcendental argument, is that if somebody addresses the opposite to what we're positing, then we would show that it is impossible, right? Like that.
Do you want
to? It wouldn't address that.
Do you want to argue about it real quick?
Do you hold to
it? So what I was going to say is that, like, if I'm a naturalist, one of the things I would want a person to consider before acting like a total predator for philosophy for some reason, I would say, like, well, look, if I posted this in chat, if I have knowledge of the color red, and I have this from, I'm a designer, so I know RGB really well, and I can tell you all about RGB red. If there's a way that knowledge transfers in a possible world to knowledge about red that's based on the light spectrum, or based on cognition and how our visual cortex processes light, I would say that it doesn't seem very likely that what anyone can possibly mean by knowledge is it. Naturalism undermines that. I would have to learn more than just hearing the word triumvirate or whatever Unitarian God. That doesn't make any sense to me.
So the interesting thing that you're trying to bring into this light spectrum, right? What about people that are like colorblind?
That literally has nothing to fucking do with what I just said. A colorblind person probably wouldn't like come out and their first philosophical statement is, "Hi, my name is Frank. I'm colorblind. And by the way, I know the color red, even though I'm colorblind."
But you're talking about the grounding and the certitude, right? We're asking for an epistemological grounding.
Where did grounding and certitude? Where did grounding a little bit, but where did certitude come in?
Certitude would be the justification.
Why are you trying to? No, that's not what certitude is.
Certitude is being confident in what you're asserting.
Right.
Yeah.
So being confident isn't the same thing as being certain.
Certitude isn't
Does that not make
confidence.
sense?
Certaintude is absolute inability to be wrong. You can be confident in things you can be wrong about.
That's inerrancy, Corinth.
Yeah, you can be a
certitude.
Here's a great example. Hume is a famous skeptic, often for a naturalist worldview, like we were talking, considered the guy that started philosophy of science. And so if I'm a skeptic, if I'm a Humean skeptic, I can still claim to have knowledge about something. Does that not make that concept doesn't make sense?
By your own definition, I mean, we could reject your definition of knowledge.
You could. That's fine, but then we're not having a conversation, right?
Yeah, you'd simply just be declaring information rather than like what knowledge would be, because like anybody can have information, like they could proclaim information.
So does this not make sense? Am I in fucking Looney Tune land? Am I the only person who feels like I stepped off a fucking flight and I ended up in Dubai? What is going on right now?
Bro's losing it.
What is happening?
Philosophical argument, man.
So, for your knowledge, gentlemen, do you remember all of those super chats that came in earlier that said "boot duck"? Here's a pre-boot for duck. Don't let duck up. This is duck.
Wow, they're hating on duck. I think duck is bringing some.
Shut the duck up.
Another one that came in. Sorry, Andre with the 50 of something. Why is that Yahweh the God of universe specifically, and not say Zeus?
Zeus is physical matter, and Zeus possesses physical matter, and he's also created.
Not according to the Stoic Zeus, who's the nous.
So there's different interpretations on what Zeus is. So then I mean, at that point, then saying why not Zeus, then that would be problematic.
The Stoic Zeus was just the name they gave.
So if God possesses physical matter, then it can't be the God that grounds it.
Intrinsically, if God possesses physical matter in the aspect of its internal being, then he wouldn't be the one that would be providing matter, because then everything would be ex materia. So then we just have to follow like a pantheistic view.
Okay, so you said he had matter. You didn't say this entire diatribe of intrinsically matter, right?
Yeah, so when I said that, it would be because he's made of matter, because Zeus would be made of matter.
Different propositions.
There'd be a difference, but because when I say that
Christ
Zeus
is also made of matter.
Yeah, so tell me you don't understand the incarnation without saying it. So in terms of the incarnation,
I mean, we can go with it. Christ is fully man, fully God, right?
He took on human flesh.
Fully God.
Yeah, and the two natures that he possesses are distinct, and so his matter, the matter that he possesses, would not be intrinsic to his hypostasis. What?
So there's the physical matter part, right? The thing you just said was an issue with Zeus.
When I meant that Zeus possesses matter, I'm saying that in this fact that it's intrinsic to his being, that he is made up of matter. Christ is not made up of matter. He possesses matter because he.
What part of it shows that's intrinsic to his being?
The fact that he's Zeus or Christ.
Yeah, Zeus.
Yes. Wait, what? Zeus.
Yeah.
because he was.
I said
made.
Yeah when you first said Zeus, not.
Yes, because he was made by the Titans.
That doesn't show that's intrinsic to his being. That just shows he was
yes,
made.
it does, because the matter already existed prior to Zeus.
Yeah, but that doesn't show it's intrinsic.
I see.
This is the case in this.
in the sense of Zeus, he would be made up of matter. That
yes,
would
I
be what
agree.
he
He
would be
was
made
made up
of
of
because
matter
the
is the
matter
view,
already
but that doesn't
exists.
show he's intrinsically made up of matter.
But it
You
also
are
doesn't
stupid.
be-
I'm not sure
also
if you're
depends on his
intrinsically
being.
stupid.
Look, dude's losing it already. Again,
It also
You're
depends on what Zeus
intrinsically
does.
dishonest. I'm not sure if you're.
I'm not
Or I said that
intrinsically
backwards. You're
dishonest at all. I've
dishonest.
already
I'm not
answered
sure
it
if you're
multiple times.
intrinsically dishonest.
No. So when I said that he's made up of matter, that's because that if he's made up of matter in terms of his being, he is matter. Like he is of matter. That's not the same thing as saying that Christ possesses matter and that he took on matter economically, because he's economically composite, right? Zeus would then be considered entirely composite upon his creation. So then therefore he wouldn't be the one to create all composite beings.
Well, that just doesn't have to be the case.
Oh,
Well,
good
Again,
argument.
you're just
Corinth.
saying,
in
like-
this case, Tracy asks.
Yeah, because you're just okay. So we can go with your line of argumentation. Due to the impossibility of the contrary, I'm going to need you to justify that this is something that always had to be the case, and this was something necessarily true of Zeus. And if you can't epistemically justify this of something that exists to my given epistemic standards, you're going to just not be able to be true, and I'm going to be correct on this actually.
Well, okay, remember this.
You're drawing that as a transcendental
Stoic
argument.
Zeus.
Why do you fight it so
This-
hard, Corinne?
Stoic Zeus is a
Because he's an
reinterpretation.
I mean, that's not a
bankrupt to
straw man. So I can give you a plethora of things of how these two don't understand transcendental argument. From Father Deacon Ananias repeatedly saying that this thing that goes outside of the trilemma. Well, Schoolboy NQ here is saying that this is just an aspect of circularity within the trilemma.
I literally
We go
gave
with
the explanation that
different
it goes
aspects of
outside of the trilemma.
You explicitly stated that this is within trilemma of circularity.
He
And I
literally
said
did
that
not.
there
say
is there's a virtuous circularity that gives rise
I can
to
go
an
back and
infinite-
grab. And when you said virtuous circularity, you were talking about it being within the trilemma, right?
That's not
It
what. No,
transcends
virtuous.
the trilemma. That is not what I was saying. You intellectually bankrupt.
You said it was
mule.
within the trilemma. It was within the third leg of the trilemma. You've said that repeatedly, and now you're trying to ad
The
hoc
second
it.
leg of the trilemma. Learn to count.
You repeatedly said it was the third leg because you
And I said
started
it
off by
transcends
listing
it,
the other two and saying, well, there's a third leg. I'm using your own semantic there, which you can start to, again, lie about. It's something that people of your religiosity have a tendency to do whenever you're on the internet for some reason.
Good assertion,
instead of
brother.
accurately
Yet
being
again,
able to
good
represent
appeal to
your faith.
emotion.
And
Yeah, it is.
Tracy says
That's
with a
liar.
big
Good appeal to
pen,
you being a dishonest, stupid person who doesn't know how to answer a yes or no question.
I'm going to appeal to the money,
good rebuttal,
Corinne. Tracy came in with a big
Corinne,
10.
hold on,
What
hold on.
did...
Can I ask?
Hold
can I ask
on.
something?
Let's ask this one first. Let's let Corinth cool down. What did the Ortho Bros say about Neil's analogy about the elephant behind the wall?
Is that referring to how do we know that an elephant is behind the wall?
Well, no. Actually, that's a good question. I was saying, do I need to know what's behind the wall to refute that an elephant isn't behind the wall?
That would actually
What?
be considered something that has been used before. Actually, let me pull that up here. It's a crackers in the pantry fallacy. Give me a second.
So it's fallacious for me to say I don't think there's an elephant behind that wall, but I don't
Let me
know. What,
let me read it. Let me read it. It might help. Hold on. Let me pull it up. I have an example of it in here.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think it was me and Chase were going back and forth. If I don't know, if I don't have my knowledge grounded, then I can't make a claim about other people's epistemology.
So let me put it like this, and let me know what you think about this. The claim is that person A asserts something as true. Like, for example, there are crackers in the pantry.
Yeah.
Right. The challenge is that person B demands proof, putting the burden entirely on person A. Okay. And then the analogy, person B uses an analogy like, well, prove to me that there aren't invisible gremlins stealing the crackers every time we close the pantry door. You can't disprove that. Therefore, my skepticism about the crackers is justified.
But this is why it's not the same. Because if you're saying, I think there's an elephant behind the wall, and I say, no, there's not an elephant behind the wall, but I don't know what's behind the wall. That's not the same as me bringing in some random non sequitur, because you're the one claiming. In the case of the elephant in the wall, it's the Trinity. We're saying that you believe in the Trinity.
Yes, but then we
I'm
would make
refuting it.
arguments. Yes, but we would make arguments as to why there has to be an elephant behind the wall based
This
off
also
of all of
wouldn't
the entire
wouldn't be an
argumentation that we've been
issue,
giving.
fallacy given the transcendental argumentation you're putting forward, which is asserting necessity. If we can show a possibility of the falsity like this to be the case, then that is just a valid line of argumentation.
That's
rather
literally the whole
this
point of
have an
tag.
issue with inductive
I'm glad you're
argumentation.
I'm glad you're understanding
So-
it now. That's the whole point.
No,
of
it's
tag.
actually not.
So then
It's
you have
going
to
directly
provide
against
an
you.
alternate, right? You have to
It
provide
goes
an
directly
alternate.
against you. No, you don't actually, because this is the
Oh.
alternate. The
So then
gremlins
you can
taking it
just
is
deny
the alternate
something
in this case.
without an alternate,
No,
right? You
because
can
when
deny
you're talking
without
about
an
the
alternate.
gremlin again, when you're talking about the gremlins here, this is the alternate being proposed. The idea of this being fallacious here is showing that, well, when we're talking about the inductive idea of God, which is not the necessity, the modal aspect put forward by the transcendental argument for God, this would be a bad argumentative line to go down. When you assert necessity, and then there's the ability to show the possibility of falsehood, like the little gremlin stealing the crackers, that is sufficient to show falsehood and is not fallacious. You just don't know when it applies.
And you're starting to understand tag. I like it. So when we say that,
I actually
for
know more
example,
about tag than you,
if
Bryce.
yeah, I can tell you don't, because you freaking got absolutely baked earlier when we were 1v1ing. So behind the wall, when we're
Bryce,
talking about
you
the elephant-
directly you started directly lying. I
There you
can
go.
go through this.
There it
When
says
you
I'm
talked
lying
about
now.
there being only one true paradigm about
Nah,
2 minutes
it's
beforehand, and then I ask you,
Do
well,
you know
what's
that
the
to be
truth
true,
value of this?
Trey?
And you say it's
Oh,
paradigmatic
man,
Do you know that-
that's going to be a contradiction on your view right there. That's first of all going to be a
That wouldn't be
contradiction
a
on your view,
contradiction in my
Bryce. You're
view.
going
I
to be
literally showed you the
affirming
entire
there's going to
argumentation
be
that I
the
gave.
truth subjectivity to this claim, and that there's going to be only one paradigm that's going to be able to be true, while indexing it to not be able to give the yes or no answer because it's going to be related to paradigms.
You
But
think
even
that
at
Bryce,
my
you
view?
are a
that,
dishonest
even
person. You are
even at
incredibly
that,
stupid as
though,
well.
Keep coping, Corinth. I
even
get it.
at
Just
that,
keep coping.
though,
Bryce,
gentlemen,
you
and
don't know
don't
anything
make
about
me
argumentation
separate
because you are
the
stupid.
two of you. Shut up for a second. Even at that, though, Neil specifically said, I don't know if they are or are not back there, but I'm still making the claim that they aren't back there. And that doesn't make sense to me to say, I'm not sure, but I don't think whatever you're saying is true. Can somebody elaborate that for me, how that's even a
Yeah.
possibility to say it's a negative, but I don't even know if it's a positive either?
Yeah, what I'm saying is I don't know what exactly is behind the door. It could be a bunch of money. It could be a dead person. It could be whatever. But based on inductive reasoning, I don't think there's an elephant there, because if there was an elephant, X, Y, and Z would be true. There'd be noises, there'd be smell, there'd be some kind of indication there's a giant elephant behind that wall. So I don't have to know what's behind the wall to make the claim that I don't think it's an elephant.
Let me.
Because the claim simply just says belief. That's all it is. It's not
They-
necessarily
Yeah.
true for sure. He's just saying he believes that.
So Gnostic, in terms of like the transcendental argument, right? The thing that you just said when you said like I don't know if there's an elephant behind the wall, but you think that there should be something like, for example, inductive, like there should be smells, or there should be sight, like so, like you can see like maybe like cracks in the wall because maybe it's like it's stuck back there or something, or you're hearing it, or things like that. Like, would you agree that that's all presupposing empiricism?
Yes, and it's the
Yeah,
likely.
so then you're reducing.
How,
Yeah.
I would have to think rationally. How would an elephant even get in that room? Did it fly in there? Like, so like there's good reason to think it's not an elephant, is what I'm saying.
It's
And that's
good
sort of
reason.
my-
It's good reason within your current paradigm, because you're
I
holding to the
agree.
empirical view. So the
Agree.
entire point then would be to show that empiricism cannot make that argument.
Well, that's still you still have the same problem with you asserting that the Trinity is the necessary precondition for knowledge.
That's why we've been doing this argument, the argumentation, the entire time regarding like the historical attestation, the biblical account,
No.
the philosophy, like all of these things coming together to have that explanatory power. Like if I were to use the elephant, for example, which sadly it's kind of a poor analogy, of course, because like we don't determine that God exists based off of empirical values. I can't smell him, right? So like it's more of like just entirely on a philosophical basis. But like so using something like saying, I don't think there's an elephant behind the wall because I can't see an elephant, right? Like that is presupposing that if you were to see an elephant, that is the justification for knowledge.
Also, evidence that there's an elephant, the sound of an elephant, the smell, that type of thing. There could be other things indicating that there's an elephant there.
Inevitably, you'd have to open the door to prove whatever is. Right?
Yeah.
But we don't have the access to open the door. But what
will.
I'm gathering is that Christianity provides like a peephole to kind of see through, or maybe a cup to put your ear against the door to try to hear better, to hear the elephant. It offers some way to maybe not, you can't open the door, but offer
Right.
some way to allow you to get a little bit closer to that evidence. Does
I
that
get
make
that.
sense?
But I guess the
door
reason
will
why I brought up,
eventually be open.
yeah, I get that. But the reason why I brought that analogy in the first place was it was based on me saying I don't need to actually know for sure what's behind the wall to make a claim that something X isn't behind the wall. I can still not know. I don't have to have full knowledge of what's behind the wall to make a claim about the wall. That's all. That's all.
But yes, if based on what you're saying though, then that would work against you. Because if you're saying I don't need full knowledge to know what's behind the wall, then you don't need full knowledge to believe what your friend is telling you is behind the wall. Right?
We're
They're
all
simply
we all had the same problem. Is what I'm saying.
right.
Yes,
think
which
that's
is
We're all using.
why,
I think we're all using inductive reasoning. That's what I think.
If
which
the
is then it would go
friend,
into arguments. Right?
but if the friend had somebody who stood there once before, say there's an elephant behind the wall, and they had someone who stood there years before that, say there's an elephant behind the wall, and so on and so forth, then I think
and then there was an
right.
attestation of knowing the man who put the elephant behind the wall.
Yes, and then you kind of investigate the
It
argument.
requires faith. Gnostic.
At the end of the day, it does it. That's what it falls down. It falls back.
Well,
on.
here's the thing. Like, we understand the tag isn't a silver bullet to shoot faith into your heart.
Right.
Like God is. We were made in the image and likeness of God. God has free will, therefore we have free will. God can do anything except go against his own nature. God going against our free will would be him going against his own nature.
Sure.
Yeah. And one last one.
It would be a contradiction for us to be forced to believe in him.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
One last one before we get our final thoughts and shut down. With the big five, I've seen this game before. It's heavy, but not an elephant. Bid $1 and give me half the car when we win. If it's a kitchen sink, give it to Spurgsy. Choose between door 1 and 3, gentlemen. Behind each door is a prize, but it's not an elephant. All right, let's get through some closing statements. James, would you like to kick us off with your final thoughts, please?
Well, I was kind of really wanted to get more into the whole Trinity discussion, because I also wanted to say something about how do you get that Paul says something about Godhead, but he says nothing about Trinity, nor does the New Testament period say anything about Trinity. And also the fact is, where do you get the idea that Jesus would have to be pre-existing? But that's questions to ponder on and everything. So yeah.
Thank you, James. Bryce, to you.
Well, so I mean, I kind of came in a tad bit late to like the overall thing. I was kind of watching for a while, and then freaking people kept telling me to come up here, so I decided to. But I mean, for me, like, I really appreciate conversation, especially that we had, Gnostic. I've never spoken to you before, but I thought it was really fruitful and very good.
Same.
A lot of knowledge being passed, and we got to dive into the history stuff, which I know that you're super big into, of course.
Right.
And just to kind of like close my thing out, I will address with James. Me and Gnostic did actually talk about that for probably about 30 minutes regarding like biblical account for the Trinity and like why we come to those conclusions that Jesus is God. But I'm not going to reiterate literally the entire point, but I did make multiple arguments for that.
Fair enough. Thank you, Bryce. And to your nemesis, Corinth, would you like to give your final thoughts?
Sure. For a bunch of the Christians out there, if you just want to say, I have faith, I believe in God, I don't have like perfect reason to believe in God, I could be wrong, but I still have this belief, it makes me happy, I truly do believe this thing, any of these reasons, fine. No one's gonna, there might be some like internet atheist wearing the fedora out there that's going to start yelling at you, but most people aren't going to look at you and say, okay, this person's being like irrational. If you want to use tag as the silver bullet against people who are taking the ultimate skeptic line, showing, well, they have to be hard solipsists at that point, that's a perfectly reasonable use for this thing. But we do just exist within the same issues within the trilemma. We don't have certainty on our beliefs. We don't have that like bootstrap of, well, even if God has perfect knowledge of everything, we're not God. We don't have that belief. To say that that would like be in our heads is something that we can show our knowledge is distinct from that, even under the tag view, because theonomist epistemology, if that was the only way to have knowledge, God would need to have it revealed to him as well. This isn't something Christians hold, so it's very clearly the case that Christians don't hold. All knowledge has to be revealed. God can have access to that knowledge without it being revealed to him, because you would need super God in that case. This is going to just first of all be like an issue of God being the necessary precondition for knowledge. It might be for like human knowledge. That could be fine. Schoolboy, I know you're smarter than this. I don't think Bryce is. If you want to go
smarter than what you
afterwards,
just said.
Schoolboy.
Ooh.
You can tell me exactly where you think I'm wrong after that, but you can tell me where you think I'm wrong.
No more.
Can I say
no
one
more.
last line? One
One
sentence,
last
sir?
one, Corinth.
So, Schoolboy, if you want to go over this after to see exactly where you think I went wrong, I'm happy to hear it from you. But I also just want to show, hey, this is where I think your friend over here was just engaging really dishonestly.
Corinth made it fun.
Gareth always makes it fun, but it's very
me out.
hard to
Help me
find people who want to debate Corinth because he digs and digs and digs and never grants.
I thought him and Bryce were both throwing haymakers at each other. Like I was enjoying it.
I just match
It was-
energy, man. I just match energy.
Schoolboy, to you, your final thoughts, please.
Well, Sarah, thanks for having me up. First time up here. I'm a friend of Wi-Fi's. He's the one that pointed us over here. Neil, it was a pleasure talking with you.
Same.
I would encourage any listeners, if you want, you can join Bryce's Discord. I help run it. It's discord.gg/orthodoxos. If someone wants to type that in the chat, that'd be great. But yeah, I hope you all find Christ. I hope you find that peace. And I hope you find that spiritual growth.
Wonderful. Thank you, Schoolboy. Gnostic, to you.
I really enjoyed this discussion, and I think it was worthwhile. Hope people learned something from it. I think I came in here in good faith. I hope so. I hope I came off that way. I was truly trying to understand tag and presuppositionalism and why people think that the triune Christian God fits the model rather than other gods. I still do think that at the end of the day, we're all using our own inductive reasoning to decide what we think is true and what isn't true. We all appeal to authorities, whether it's doctors or even the church in some cases, or the car dealers or whatever thing we're doing. We have to appeal to some authorities, and we have to weigh arguments and question things. And I think it all comes back to our own experience, and people decide that they believe in Christianity based on kind of like personal experiences and things like that. I do think tag is great because you have this accountability of everything. I get why people are attracted to having all things accounted for, but I don't think that necessarily is like you guys had silver bullet at the end of the day. I think everything does come down to inductive reasoning and using logic and things like that. So, but anyways, it was great. I understand a little more about where you guys are coming from after this.
I think a good way to explain tag is it's a beautiful argument to show that faith is not irrational.
Fair.
And then, like I said, it still leaves the door open for free will, and the last jump is the ball's in your court.
That's fair. I like that. Summation of it. Final words. Marcus with the Big Ten says his sister just had a baby girl, Ava. Juneteenth baby. LOL. Christ is King. That's lovely. And that young lovely lady will now be able to celebrate hopefully a holiday as well every year now going forward, and we'll have that day off every year. Congratulations for being an uncle. And Steve White dropping 5 gifted Raging Tomato memberships. Thank you so kindly. I'm incredibly grateful. This was probably the most tame Throwdown Thursday we've ever had. And I think Gnostic, it's because you came in so genuinely inquisitive and curious and ready to learn. And I think that speaks volumes. And I think it went very well. And I think we all were able to kind of gather something new from this this stream, to be quite honest. Tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a double header. 6 p.m. Eastern time. We've got Is God Evil with Craig from FTFE and Lucas from Method Ministries. I'm really excited for that. It'll be short and brief. It'll be about 2 hours, 2.5 debate, and then followed by the great Mormon debate that you're all looking for with Andrew Wilson and the lovely chaplain Lance O'Neill. They will be here. It's going to be a hot one starting at 9:15 p.m. ET. Be here or be square. We all know that one is going to be hot. I am sending you over to Raid Fatty. You all booted him off a short 3 minutes after he got here. So he went and decided to do his own thing. So we're going to raid, at the very least, go over, send tomatoes, send some love, and you don't have to stay, but at least send some love his way. Gnostic, I'm super appreciative of having you on tonight. And Bryce and Schoolboy, if you both could reach out to me, if you guys do debates, I'd love to have you on sometime. Yeah, reach out to me. Wi-Fi knows how. Outside of that, everyone, fuck off.
This video was somewhat informative. That's all I got for today. Until next time, see ya.